OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
All right. You're very welcome along. It's 7:30. It is Tuesday morning, I want to say. If you want to get in touch with us this morning, we'd love to hear from you. You can get us youtube.com/off the ball. Make sure you subscribe and then you'll be allowed to leave a comment. You can always text the show 0879 180 180 on WhatsApp if you want. Or you can get us at Off the Ball AM on Twitter. Adrian Barry is here of a Tuesday.
What's going on? Morning, Ger.
Also here is Colm. Colm, how are you?
Ger and Adrian, good morning. What a treat. Adrian Barry. This early in the week.
Well, it was an emergency. It was an emergency situation.
Not at all.
What we're dealing with?
Not at all. We have two award-winning broadcasters on the same show.
Our first choice, first choice number 10 went down, and
it just goes to show the quality and strength and depth of the squad, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
A bit like the match you were on Saturday. You saw it there and then. The strength and depth of Ireland. That's what we had John this morning.
Into the conversation here.
I did notice that there was no. Certainly, I don't know. Maybe I missed your social media. I should have gone looking for it. A little bit carried away. You know, you've been in those nice,
a few glasses of wine in Gers. That's what we're talking
cheese eating seats before, and this would have been once in your life where the original tweet, where you're watching a rugby game, you're going, this might be the best team in the world, was actually justified.
Well, the other one was
the
fairly
best Irish
justified.
team in any sport ever.
The other one was also justified. And I mean, it does lead us back into a conversation that's been happening about the number of Leinster players obviously in this team. This is me trying to loosely defend my previous argument. Which I'm
your previous argument, just remind new viewers, we've got many of them.
I basically had said that Leinster are... Did I say that? I said they were
the greatest
possibly the greatest Irish team
ever. They just won a quarter final in the Pro 14.
No, it was either a semi-final or I think it might have been a final at the Aviva.
I don't think it was a final. I'm not even sure it was a final. Was it? Maybe it was.
No, it was. It
was against one of the Welsh teams. They beat a Welsh province at the Aviva.
But they had to look at they had to do to get there. I think that argument does stack up. I mean, the ultimate argument to any of these conversations, including the one about Ireland, is that
show us your medals.
Yeah, but also who do they play? That's. No matter if Ireland go on and win the World Cup later this year, you will have the brigade who just don't want to jump on board with things and will just say, it's not as pervasive as soccer. The boxing achievements were better. And those are fair enough arguments. I don't know what the right answer to any of that stuff is, but you can only beat what's in front of you there, Bill.
Yeah, okay. Good seats?
They were a bit... they were in the corner a little bit. I've had some great experiences of different seats at the Aviva. The most interesting one is probably I was for the Novembers for the New Zealand game, right behind the Havelock Square end, the dipped end.
Oh yeah, I've actually never been there.
I was sitting right in the seats directly behind the post. It was an incredible view. Now you can't see anything once the ball goes outside that 22. It's like you're looking at the TV for most of the match.
Yeah.
And this one was, so we were in the corner a little bit at the opposite end, where Ireland were scoring into the second half. So not a bad view of that, but yeah. It was it was a nervy game. I felt there was like a boisterousness on the way into the game. There was like a real sort of expectation before the game and like a little bit of nervousness, but more so sort of boisterousness. And then I think once things kicked off, because Ireland were not what everybody expected over the first 60 minutes, the atmosphere was, I don't want to say flat, but it was certainly a little bit of the fields would break out every now and then, and not everybody would get into it because everybody was kind of like, I can't even really sing because this is so bad. The time where they got most vocal was every time the swing low broke out, and then people would try to shush that by either jeering or singing the fields. To the point where, I don't know, was it picked up on TV about 4 or 5 minutes into the second half? Johnny Sexton was right down at the end. Ireland had got a line out right down the English line, and he was there, which you don't really tend to see from him, and he was like giving it one of these to the crowd like for a good 15-20 seconds to indicate that he wasn't happy with the level of support.
I didn't see that. No, yeah. I didn't notice it, and it's relatively unusual. Yeah, I don't mind the fact that it's tense. So you shouldn't be... Your natural instinct when things are tense is to like grip your seats, sit on the edge of your seats. It's not to like, we're all here and we're pissed and we're do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's fine. I thought the atmosphere was good. I actually think the atmosphere has always been good when the games have been good. when we're playing and hockeying Scotland or Wales or Italy, people are going to the pub, and they're coming back with their drinks because we're hockeying them. But was the problem of people getting up and going to get pints, was it particularly pronounced in the game against England when the Grand Slam was on the line?
Not my experience. I have to say it was one of the best games I've been at for. I see where you're going. It was one of the best games I've been at for that. Like I can remember almost the biggest issue you had was that sort of when you're sat in those seats, you're always going to get people that are sort of way to your right where you're trying to see the action who are standing up preemptively too early. You know, like
the early standers.
Is it rude to shout at people anymore?
No, I think
sit down.
I think it's allowed.
Anymore. And like once one person goes,
yeah, everybody has to.
There's like 1,000 people behind them that have a knock-on impact, and I think you get lost in the game. And still, also. What they should bring in with immediate effect, having said all that, the thing that they have at some of the American sports where if there's a moment of importance happening at the pitch, you're not allowed back to your seat. Wait until that's over and then go back. They should just bring that in with immediate effect.
That's tough to police.
Tough shit. If you're going out for a pint or you're going for a wee, whatever.
Who decides?
You're also the Freddie Stewart on the.
A lot of pressure.
Do you know what
a lot of people are like, oh, I mean, do you know who I am?
No, but also it's not. You're not missing the game. So you're stood at the window.
Sue you and
or you're stood at the top of the stairs. Yeah, well,
you know.
It felt like watching a home that everyone was very excited in the stadium at the start of the match, and then everyone realised, oh, this is going to be a lot tighter for a lot longer than we anticipated. There felt like you almost could hear nervous chatter.
Yeah, there was a lot of chatter where I was, in a way that I haven't experienced fully at a lot of other games before, where everybody was getting involved. There was like a cohort of about 10 people around and everybody was getting involved.
Like debates.
What did you think? What's happening here? What's going on there? There was definitely that investment of, like, you took your seats and you were like,
we're in this together.
Soak this in. Everybody around you now, remember those names. It was like somebody needed to stand up and do a lion speech of, look at the person around you, look to the person to your left, shake their hand. These are the people you're going to be sat with as Ireland win the first ever Grand Slam on home turf. But we have
Dublin, obviously we won on Ravenhill. Ravenhill also home turf
in Dublin.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of history being made, I was intrigued to know from yourself what the reaction was like when Johnny Sexton broke the record, because at that point Ireland were 6-0 down, so there was definitely a focus, and this game isn't going as planned, so that halves the deficit. Was there any sort of like, oh, fair play, Johnny? Because there was a standing ovation for about 5 seconds, but the game resumed so fast that was cut short.
No, it did feel. It didn't feel like 5 seconds at the time, and it did kind of feel like, oh, we're standing up, okay, but like, hang on a second, we should tip the cap, but like, hang on a second, there's a greater thing at play here. So yeah, I don't know. I think if it had happened later in the game, and we were,
I think if it had happened against Italy when we were 44-0 up, everybody would have.
There'd have been a raucous.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was appropriate to the moment.
Correct. Yeah.
Right, if you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. 087 9180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream, or you can tweet us at Off The Ball AM. We're live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night edition available now. Loads of news overnight that we just want to talk about briefly. The English press are reporting that the Antonio Conte era is coming to an end. The Times are saying that the players think the Conte era is over. I think one of the other newspapers, might be The Guardian, are reporting that he'll be sacked over the next few days, and that it could potentially be Ryan Mason back in charge. The other thing is that Roy Hodgson has taken up the Patrick Vieira gig, so they ignored Kenny Cunningham's calls for Paddy McCarthy to be given the job, and it looks like Roy Hodgson is back in our lives when we thought that, I mean, he couldn't possibly come back, but he's back. And then the other news is that Scott Robertson has been given a 4-year deal by the All Blacks to be the New Zealand coach, so Joe Schmidt won't be getting that gig. And because Ian Foster had said that perhaps Schmidt might leave when he leaves as well at the end of this World Cup over the last, or certainly had intimated that, you know, that might not be the case. So it looks like Scott Robertson will be allowed to pick his own team. No details on that, so that's pure speculation at this stage that I've seen so far. But New Zealand are back with Scott Robertson.
I was surprised to see the last time this sort of came up a few weeks back about the speculation about the job, that Joe was so far down the list. There was Scott Robertson obviously was there. Leon MacDonald, I think, was ahead of him in the betting. Yeah. So I don't know, because there was definitely quotes from him recently saying that he had said not that long ago, listen, I don't really want to, a lot of family stuff going on. I don't really want to get back to that level of coaching just yet. But then there was something more recently saying, well, if it was to come up, I mean, what Kiwi is going to turn down the opportunity to coach the All Blacks? But I presume it's the thing that most New Zealanders have been hanging out for years.
is Scott Robertson.
Yeah.
Seems to be. Like, everybody seems to love him. His team seems to play amazing rugby, and it's not great for the rest of the world.
Would you rather like take on a Foster coached New Zealand at the World Cup or a Razor coached? I know the answer to that. I know my answer.
Yeah, but would you rather take on a Foster coached at the World Cup or a Joe Schmidt coached at the World Cup?
Foster is my preference of all of them.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely wouldn't want Joe Schmidt at this World Cup, and even his imprints getting more and more into it, like that attention to detail, which might be able to transform a team of very talented players. Like we can talk about the Joe Schmidt versus Andy Farrell thing a little bit later on in the show, but it certainly feels to me like there's no way that we will be playing the rugby that we are now if Joe Schmidt was still there, and that. We needed Andy Farrell. We absolutely needed Andy Farrell. And I don't buy that it was just a linear thing, because if it was just linear, he was just building on immediately what Schmidt had done. Then why did it take a year and a half for everything to click for them? I think that he is his own man, and this is their own thing, and they had to go back to the very start to allow players like Andrew Porter to reach his full potential. And we're going to talk about Porter a little bit later on as well, so I don't know. We
didn't know we needed Farrell was the thing at the time, right? Like, we definitely, the current history is not reflecting extremely warmly on Schmidt. They're like, okay, people kind of forget the success that he brought. I mean, look what he did with Leinster, like all this stuff that has happened under the Joe Schmidt era. It's been slightly sort of washed in a slightly different colour, let's say.
Well, I think that the hagiography and the mythology around Joe Schmidt got too high. Like, he came into a Leinster side that had already won a European Cup under Michael Cheika. He came into an Ireland side that had already won a Grand Slam under Declan Kidney and reached new levels with those teams. But he isn't the starter of that story, and he's not the end of that story. Whereas actually, at the time, if you were to read like the stuff, was like, oh, this is absolutely incredible. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened. He's a genius, and he obviously is a coaching genius. But I'm not sure that necessarily he created the environment that the team has now, where they're all able to get better and they all feel like they're, like it was a very small squad. No one ever kind of came in and seemed to get particularly better when they reached the Ireland setup, the way that, like, you can point to several players who were subs at their club team, who, like Gibson Park, for example. Like, the transformation of Gibson Park into one of the best scrum halves in the world. Like, he's not first choice for Leinster. And then they're like, you're going to come in and you're going to join our team, and you can do something that we see. Like that, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe someone's going to point out examples where Schmidt was able to do that and pick players. But anyway, look, everybody knows the difference in the style and the approach at this stage. And I don't mean to diminish the career that Schmidt had, but like, we got beaten in a World Cup by Argentina in a quarter-final, we got beaten by Japan and the All Blacks in another World Cup, and so his record's not that much better than Kidney's. There's an extra couple of championships in there, but it's not like it's a complete outlier. And then Andy Farrell is a kind of step down. It's actually, you'd have to say, we're building. Farrell is now ascending to a higher height, and the big test is the World Cup. If we go out in the group stages in the World Cup, then it's just the same as everything else. So
I find it interesting that Farrell must have been Farrell, the old infamous the mood in the camp, Ger. The mood in the camp, our old friend, the mood in the camp.
You better explain to people why you hate that.
The mood in the camp is just like, if people in
what is the mood in the camp?
Journalism school 101 needs to be, when you find yourself at a press conference or in some sort of an interview with a sports person, don't ask them how the mood in the camp is. I mean, unless there's been like big reports that the mood in the camp is not good, which it seems like, in a nice segue, that in Schmidt's time it wasn't all that great. But in the Farrell era, it does appear as if, like, he must have been sitting there for the 4 or 5 years under Schmidt going, if I was to get, I must do this differently, right? Like, because there's a different philosophical approach here in terms of the style of play and the mood, our old friend, the mood in the camp.
Has this perhaps made you revisit your hatred of the question, when actually, if they would actually tell you the truth, well, do you know what, we feel a little bit constrained, we feel like we're under pressure the whole time, whereas these lads are like, actually, Andy Farrell knows the name of my kids. Do you know?
Yeah.
Not that Schmidt didn't, but like, he seems to...
The question specifically is like a bland question that always deserves a bland answer, and specifically came up at a press conference with an Ireland player some years ago, where there was an interesting line of questioning about doping in sport, and it was getting very interesting, and one person in the room was not all that interested in the way the question was going and said, whatever about that. How's the mood in the camp? To which
Pretty
everybody
good.
with like a half a vein of journalism in the room just exhaled and packed up their laptop.
Is your disdain for it because there's so little you can do with that question?
It's a nonsense question.
Well, who's going to tell you the truth?
The mood in the camp? It's
We're
like
all pissed off at each other.
You're probably hoping for that 1% chance that the body language betrays the words.
But then,
not with that question.
and also, as far as I know, you were working in radio at the time, so the body language thing is non-transmissible.
Yeah.
Then I've got nothing for you because you're not
There's
going
a
to say anything.
prophylactic on the body language.
That's feel to me since Saturday particularly that the Joe Schmidt here has been torn up, isn't it? And God, that wasn't that great at all, and he really ruined us.
I actually think it's the opposite.
Which is crazy.
I think, well, it's not. I mean, the truth is obviously in between, right? The truth is that we underperformed at the key moments, and potentially because of some blind spots that the head coach had.
Yeah.
You'd have to say that the squad, the talent of the squad that went to the World Cup 4 years ago was excellent and should have done better than it did. But we failed to beat a Japan side who were good, but we hadn't done enough work.
It does feel
we hadn't considered them as a potential team that was going to beat us, and that's on the head coach.
Yeah, but it feels that even as I'm seeing the last couple of days that because of the World Cup in 2019, that tarnished everything that happened before that. But like you forget that Schmidt under this, Jacob Stockdale inspired night against New Zealand and the 2018 Six Nations, and he was on a late show, and people were saying this is like Joe Schmidt's the best sports coach in Irish sporting history, and here we are 5 years later being like, oh, that was a bit of a damp era, wasn't it? And
but
now we actually have a proper manager in place.
Was that
That's
correct?
What it feels like.
Was it correct that he was the best at the
that
time?
It probably was.
No, it wasn't though. Is my point.
Well, he had achieved things with Leinster and Ireland that no other coach mostly was achieving. That was the thing. And like the quality of rugby, we were willing to forgive it was like an anti-Stephen Kenny move. We were like willing to forgive we weren't really overly aware, but the quality of the play was obviously not particularly good. But I think, like in terms of, we talk about the sort of changing of a narrative of a head coach like that. So you have all the little bits of stories that start to come out, like, so you remember the Scotland thing from, what year was that, 2017, whatever year it was, when we went over there and the bus got a little bit delayed going into the stadium and everybody was up in arms about it. And then you had, like, was it Jack Conan out after the Scotland game this year, and we were saying, if no matter what happens, if we have to get off the bus just before the whistle goes, then we'll be prepared to do that. So you've that helps feed a changing narrative of, that was fine, that was grand, and that was of its time.
Yeah.
But I mean, this stuff now, this is where it's at.
Yeah, and so you think that's managed or not true? Because it feels to me like that.
I think it's totally true.
And I think that's the point here, is that like it was an incorrect analysis at the point that he's the greatest coach of all time. I'm not diminishing he did well, but certainly we can retrospectively go, there were issues there.
Yeah, but
like the level of control that he sought and brought into the team worked to a point, but then stopped working, and that's not like post fact. That's not just post fact rationalisation. That's like, we can diagnose that now, and what we're seeing is, we hope. And here's the thing: this team might go out in the quarterfinals, but if they die with their boots on in a game where they've actually lived up to their potential and the opposition is world class, that's completely different from going out against New Zealand the last time, where it was over by 20 minutes in, and we shouldn't even have been in that game because we should have beaten Japan in the first place and taken the alternative route to the semi-final.
It could totally go like belly up for us in France, there's no question about it. And I mean, it is an interesting point. Will we at that point go, well, we had the Grand Slam and things are developing, and we were very unlucky because some of the key players got injured, and even with the extended squad and the development we had this year,
we've got the worst draw we've ever had
against us. So yeah, exactly. So there's a ready-made narrative, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If things go to pot.
Yeah,
but I mean, I'd still need to take to the bed for.
And I would disagree with you, Colm. I think that there's been a lot of people saying that this is Joe Schmidt's team and Andy Farrell just tweaked a few little things, and that's what I've basically taken from the coverage that I've seen, and I think that's wrong. I think that actually there's a clear delineation and demarcation rather between what we're doing now and what we did then, and I see much more room for growth in this team than I did at that stage. Anyway,
I feel a lot of the coverage has been that. Joe Schmidt was really a control freak, and it didn't help the individualism of any players or any creativity, and a bit like Pep Guardiola at his worst with Manchester City. And when Andy Farrell is, he allows players to be himself. So the Mac Hansen example, would Schmidt have allowed Hansen back on media duty after his comments about England? Who knows? Maybe. That's probably overblown as well in itself. But there is a kind of revisionism I feel about Schmidt during this Six Nations. I would say the exact opposite to you, Ger, that it feels like if you didn't watch Schmidt's Ireland, you would say, who was this schmuck almost? Because of
sorry,
what they
hang
did
on
at
a
the World
second.
Cup.
And are you saying the analysis that you started that bit there is wrong?
What do you mean?
You said you used the word control freak. Do you think that's wrong?
Yeah, because I think
But is it
you
not
have to go back
exactly-
to 2018 and what he achieved with that side. And like Jerry Thornley made the point last night on Monday Night Rugby, and you could disagree with this, that Schmidt essentially, taught Ireland how to win. Or sorry, I think Thornley was quoting. And there, to an extent, that was true. Because the New Zealand
We not win a
victory-
Grand Slam. Did I imagine Ronan O'Gara kicking a drop goal to win a Grand Slam, like a Grand Slam, which happened before? Do you know what I mean? Like this is like history starting in 1992 for football. It didn't. Like it's a continuum.
But I think you have to separate the results, which were exceptional, mostly from the style of play and the way we found our way playing that style of play. Because there was definitely, there was phraseology around the camp that was used about like how stringent a tight camp he was running.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like particularly, I don't, is this important? But it didn't feel like it was a particularly fun place to be for the players.
But that's
the knot in the pit of your stomach driving down Carton House. That story's come out in recent weeks. Like I guess I don't know what you're saying, Colm.
I don't know. People remember how you made them feel, and it feels like with the Andy Farrell era that everyone's having a much better time. So look, I'll put it to you like this: say the World Cup's a disaster again, and it's another quarter-final exit. Well, I wonder what the reaction is going to be to Farrell.
And there'll be a massive backlash. There will be a massive backlash. But are you saying you don't think he was a control freak?
I don't think he was a control freak in terms of a negative impact for the vast majority of his squad. His time with Ireland, because you look at the success just before that World Cup, or just before the 2019 Six Nations, that first game against England in Dublin, where England came to town and won by 13 points. I think up to that point, everything that Schmidt was putting in place was a structure that was a winning formula. And for me, the interesting change in the analysis of it was he was probably doing the exact same thing, and then that turned into a negative. And it was because of the results. So the narrative completely changed as a result because of the results. And it was introspection about, maybe the fact that he doesn't allow his players to think creatively is actually a negative. Even though what the previous examples we've seen is that formula worked brilliantly for this Irish side, and I think that's slightly unfair.
It didn't work brilliantly though. It worked to a certain point and then stopped working.
Well, what are you saying in the peak of the success?
But the peak of the success was he didn't build enough depth ahead of the World Cup, where we end up being beaten by Argentina. I've definitely heard people who know way more about rugby than me say Argentina were going to win that game anyway because they're attacking width outside. I know Brian O'Driscoll said that Payne was injured, and so therefore the defence out wide would have been better if he'd been playing. I'd love if AI could play that game where we have our full team and we model it out, and a million times we play the game, we see how many times that Argentina team win that game, and who knows what would have happened after that. But there was no strength and depth that they hadn't been, and then they spent the next couple of years trying to build some strength and depth, and then at the last minutes they're like, okay, we don't have any, and Joey Carberry plays through injury and then is unavailable for the game against Japan. And the other thing is that when a camp is as tight as that one was, remember the teams wouldn't be released to the press. There was an investigation at one stage because a team had got out. I don't know if somebody had told their mum that they were in the team, and the mum had told somebody, and then all of a sudden this is a massive. There was an incident with a room key card that became a big deal because somebody had been found. One had been found.
Had lost their key,
and it was like a bad attention to detail. Like all of the stories, this isn't post fact. This you were hearing these stories. You're talking about the parody that was going around about the camp,
But I think so. I don't think it's in question that there was a controlled. It was a controlled environment. But I think Schmidt was doing that very deliberately. He didn't wander into that. It wasn't against his personality. This was absolutely by design. He went in and he looked at some of his parts and he thought, this is the way I need to play it. And I mean, even listen to, it might have been Donald Lennon on the TV last night talking about how Andy Farrell devolves the power base even within his own team in terms of Mike Catt and Simon Easterby and Paul O'Connell, that he's saying to them on a Monday, here, all this went wrong at the weekend. What are you going to do about it? Whereas, I don't think... And the evidence, nearly come full circle to the point I made earlier on about Farrell, the evidence of what was going on previously wasn't that. It was like a mad genius in the tower.
Exactly. I sat up all night coming up with these 3 plays. If we do these 3 plays, we're going to win the game. And they do those 3 plays, and they do win the game. But then eventually, like over a period of time, that wears off. Anyway, we've gone way over in this. 7:55 this morning. The new Ireland jersey was released yesterday. It's fair to say, some of the most spectacular pushback from football fans I've seen ever. Even, I don't know, maybe it was just on the social media accounts that I was looking at, but people did not like the new Ireland jersey.
I like it. Like, is that outrageous? I mean, I'm not offended. I'm certainly not so offended by the jersey that I get really irate about it. I think it's nice. Like, it's a throwback. Honestly, the first thing I thought when I saw it was Paul McGrath. That's not a bad first image to get in your head when you see a jersey for the first time. It is a bit of a throwback, so I like it. I don't particularly like the Castore
like Nike, yeah,
logo. Not crazy about that. Sorry. So I don't know. That might be just whatever. But there's not much they can do about that at the same time. I like it. The only thing I would change about it is I like the collar. That's definitely a throwback to my favourite jersey of all time. As I've said on this show before, the 88 jersey with the perforation around the arm. Beautiful kit. I see Mark McCadden in the Star this morning has done up like a top 10 jerseys of all time, and he has Italian 90 on it, which I'm not mad about, because the detail in the jersey, this one here with the little sort of,
I never liked that.
I'm not mad about the little detail, which we've had on the previous jersey just gone. I like that sort of plain, and I know there's a few stripes in this. I like that, but I like the collar. The only thing I would change about it is it's like, it seems to be like a green and orange detail on it. I would scrap that and go full throwback and just make that fully orange. And for me, that wouldn't be far off.
There's no orange in the kit at all, is there?
Beautiful. It's a green and orange trim.
All right.
I would have like just fully orange. I like it.
I did see Rangers was trending on Twitter yesterday when the kit came out, because apparently it's a similar template, if not the same, to the Rangers third jersey. I'm like, I don't really care about that.
Who cares?
When I saw it, I thought Billy Bingham's Northern Ireland side 1993 qualifier against the Republic of Ireland for USA 94, that era of Northern Ireland jersey, the slightly different shades of green and the stripe, the very, very subtle stripe. That was my first thought.
That's not as good a first thought as
that was honestly
Paul McGrath. I'd be like,
this is very similar.
Okay. I presume you don't like it then, or do you? Are you a big fan of the Northern Ireland jersey?
I'm not a huge fan of it.
I was in the office.
I can't remember the last Ireland jersey I liked.
I was in the office yesterday, Ger, and I dropped that into our Teams channel, and the office was silent, and all I heard was, in a Cork accent coming from the middle of the room. Yeah,
that's probably about fair. I'll probably lean on the side of being not mad about it. It's retail there for €65.
Well, the price of jerseys, of course, is a whole other conversation.
And I don't think I'd buy it, put it that way. And actually, I saw the full kit in action too. So have you seen the shorts and socks?
Yeah, not mad about either of those. I'd say the shamrock and the socks now would be...
The further south you go, the worse it gets.
Yeah, that's
that kit.
But I don't know. It's certainly not one to be... I mean, the Rangers and Northern Ireland stuff, I think you're reaching for some negative side to it there.
Okay, can we talk about so we've been on board the hype train for Evan Ferguson / excitement train. We want to dial that back a little bit from the hype. It's like and we had Jasmine Bab on the show I think 2 or 3 months ago, and she did a deep dive on the stats to see how well he was performing versus other benchmarks, and there's a popular 100,000 followed account on
EBL,
Twitter at EBL 2017. Evan Ferguson combines the best of Erling Haaland and Wayne Rooney and rolls them into one, is the opening line. You had me there, lads. You had me there to Evan Ferguson combines. I'm like, I wonder what the rest of this is. And that's an actual statement. And then there's a thread of basically nothing, just like clips of him saying this guy's good. He's very good. No, he's very good in different ways. And I for one am here for the 25 tweet threads about how good Evan Ferguson is, and it's basically every good moment that he's had in every game, and I'm like, I'm pretty excited. So when we're just going to beat France 3-0 now, are we? Is that what's going to happen?
I was looking at that link this morning and sort of thinking, I was waiting for from this analysis account, which it appears to be all these like numbers and like stats to back up the fact that that rather lofty statement, it must be said. But there's a lot of writing, as you probably tend to get, like a lot of featured think pieces in a week like this, where the club action is not a huge amount of club games. But Chris Sutton is writing about him in one of the papers this morning. Very
The Mail have a full page of love. I'd love to see if this is like the English Mail as well as the Irish Mail. But the Chris Sutton piece is certainly carried in both papers, you'd assume, is it?
Yeah, it feels like it is. Could be wrong about that. Feels like it is. But yeah, very, very complimentary stuff about him. I can't find it there now. That it's very complimentary about it. But does sort of you're kind of like, the one thing we're in the absence of, and we'll hopefully get to put this part right over the next few days, is like seeing him in that beautiful green shirt and seeing how he goes in an Irish system and seeing how he goes without the likes of, you know, the quality players that he has around him at Brighton, and, you know, a manager that different manager who feels like the right manager at the right place for Ferguson. So that we're in the absence of that little bit at the minute, and how the Irish style suits him. Reading that thread, I'm like, I mean, it doesn't matter what we play whatever we want to play, just get the ball up to him and we'd be grand.
Who's Ireland's Matoma? That's
exactly
what we need to find, you know, because he has a great partnership with Matoma.
Well, even McAllister, Caicedo, like,
they're not bad. You know, you would certainly say that Brighton are better than Ireland at the moment.
The best thing you can say about Ferguson is, objectively, it is starting to become hard to ignore him. He's the top scoring teenager in the Premier League, and I know it was Grimsby Town in the FA Cup, and Brighton were going to win very early on after their early goal, but that touch on his chest and cushioned volley finished for his first goal of the day, Evan Ferguson. Beautiful.
Yeah, we said this on the show yesterday.
Beautiful.
We did, like, we were getting carried away, and we're getting carried away again today, and we're going to continue to get carried away. There's one in the middle of this. If you want a technical number 9, Ferguson is your man. If you want a ruthless number 9, Ferguson is your man. If you want a number 9 who scores tap-ins and headers thanks to his physicality and positional discipline, if you want an outlet, a hard worker, Ferguson is your man.
It does, like, you know, the word of caution here.
The first time that I saw him score a goal in the Premier League was on a Twitter feed where somebody clipped a goal from, I don't know what language it was, but they were just repeating the words, Ferguson! Ferguson! And I was like, this sound is hopefully the new soundtrack to my life.
Messi, it'll be Messi, Ferguson. You know, like, you start into conversations about, like, you know, how many goals, you know, I was starting to think, you know, but in a Robbie Keane context, about the interviews that have been done about him now that'll be replayed in 20 years' time when he scored 150 goals for Ireland. And, you know, what is the ceiling for this guy? You know, what club is this guy going to end up at? Will it be Barcelona or Real Madrid? It's very hard to pick between them. You know, I suppose all of this is leading to, before the YouTube commenters take into me,
calm down.
There probably does need to be a little bit of that. It seems like he has, like, an unbelievable circle around him. Obviously his dad has been there and done that, and that helps, but the circle around him is as important as anything in terms of trying to manage him. But, like, if he goes out, and we, you know, as in the taxi on the way in here, as my mind started to drift as I stared out at the sort of bleary-eyed out through the street lights on the way into work this morning, and my mind started to dream forward as to how many goals we were going to beat France by, and
right when you were coming in,
what type of goals he was going to score. It was going to be a mix of a little bit of everything, you know. And then at some point you're like, okay, well, maybe we should just be a little bit cautious about all this. Hope for sure. But
thing.
Like, you know, because, like, the only difficulty is with getting carried away with it all is, right, that he doesn't score against Latvia and he doesn't score against France, and he only has an average game, and then suddenly it's like, well,
okay, Adrian,
remember your man. Get Ida back in the team.
3 minutes past 8 this morning. Speaking of hope, what should our hopes be for the Irish rugby team? I'm delighted to say Matt Williams is with us. Matt, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Ger. Very good, thank you.
I think if you've heard the last 60 seconds, you're aware that we're prone sometimes to getting carried away on this programme about our hopes. But for the first time in a long time, maybe the right thing to do is to lean into our hopes and belief. And with this Irish rugby team in particular, the style of play is the thing that gives us the most comfort and most excitement.
Well, it's fantastic to watch. It's just been an amazing 2 years, really. Probably a bit less, probably 18 months, to be fair, since the England game 2 years ago during COVID at the Abuba. We saw a glimmer of change, and Ireland won that day and probably saved Andy Farrell's career. And across that summer, there was some form of epiphany within the coaching staff, brought Paul O'Connell in, and they started playing a type of rugby that is modelled on Leinster, that I fully support. I don't say that to give Leinster credit. I'd say it because it become a national philosophy. We saw the under-20s win a Grand Slam on Sunday, playing the same style of rugby. If you watch the schools, the leading schools play, that's playing the same brand of rugby. So we've got this philosophy of how to play the game that's starting at schools and juniors, moving through our academies, our under-20s. Our provinces are playing very similar, with Leinster leading the way on that, and our national team is doing it. It's sexy. It's entertaining. It's great to watch. It must be a joy to play because you can see the smile on the guys' faces, and it's winning rugby. It is fantastic. And in your hope, and I share your hope for this World Cup more than any other that I've been involved with in Ireland for the last quarter of a century, because they've done the preparation 18 months out. They have done the preparation. They've got depth in their squad. Farrell has been brave enough to blood players when other players are injured, and those players have really stepped up to the mark, and they've beaten everyone. So this isn't based on hope. So Bob Hope. My father used to say, that's Bob Hope's brother, which is no hope. You can't base a plan on hope. You've got to base it on evidence, and the evidence we've got is overwhelming. They've beaten everyone. They've beaten Australia. They've beaten New Zealand, South Africa, and they've beaten all the Six Nations teams. Beaten Argentina. So everyone that we will face at the World Cup, they've beaten in the last 18 months. That is a plan based on really solid foundations.
You bring up the Leinster importance here, right? And I just want to tease this out a little bit, because there's been a bit of a backlash from various people suggesting that we need more representation from other provinces on the team for the team to fully land with the fan base. I think, if people feel how they feel, right, that's the first thing, and so you're entitled to feel whatever you think. I do think that there's a rationale behind it when you consider that Leinster went and first got Graham Henry to come and have a look at their coaching setup, and then they got Stuart Lancaster in. At the same time, Munster, through the auspices of the IRFU, decided that they were going to go the South African route, which has no bearing on how we play at international level. And so if there's a disconnect between the number of players coming through at Munster, I would argue that it's a direct result because they had their coaching ticket wrong. They've improved things. More players are coming through. More players look like they'll be able to make the step up. I've vastly oversimplified it for the sake of brevity this morning. But is there something in that actually Munster got a bit lost with the leader of their organisation, and now they're finding their way back, so we should expect more Munster players to be ready to play for Ireland over the next few years?
I think there is validity to your argument, Ger. Yeah, and Munster were lost, for sure. There's no two ways about that. And they were playing a brand of rugby that wasn't linked to the national team, in my opinion. Look, the national team is a meritocracy 100%. When you start looking at where people are playing their provincial rugby and that influences your decisions, you will fail, and fail spectacularly. It cannot be a discussion. So for example, Jamison Gibson Park and James Lowe, born in New Zealand, did their rugby training in New Zealand. They're qualified by the residency rule. Now, we can argue against the residency rule. It's something I don't like, but it's there, and they are picking them. That's got to be selected on how they're playing, not who they are. So I completely reject that. My answer to Munster and everyone else, or Leinster, remember, this is going to turn. This is going to turn in a few years. Leinster will not stay where they are. They just can't. It's just, that's sport. You don't have a dynasty that lasts 100 years. They all come up and down. When Leo goes, we don't know what's going to happen after that. But the academy system and the school system at Leinster is just pumping out really high-quality kids. You could see that on the weekend in the under-20s. That was dominated by kids, by young men coming from Leinster. So, to me, the challenge is up to the other provinces. Lift your game. Get your act together. Produce great players. Play great rugby, and you'll get picked. It's simple. It's a meritocracy. And until they do that, you pick the best players. And until, then we've got to spin this back a bit. If to get to some really... It's a painful conversation for Munster and the other provinces. I understand it. And I get accused of being biased because I coached Leinster. I also coached Ulster and I coached Island A. And at Ireland A, we were from everywhere. So all I want to see is Ireland win. That's it. That's my motivation. I want to see Ireland win. Leinster are at the top of Europe. Now, people, they got beaten in the final, they did, but they're at the top of Europe and constantly at the top of Europe with 21 of their 23 players in Europe being born in the province. Now, there is no other organisation on the planet doing that, right? There is no one else. It's an astonishing achievement that what Leinster are doing to be at the top of their international competition, like Super Rugby, with all those players, that number of players born in your province. There's no one in Australia doing it. And there's no one in New Zealand doing it because they mix their provinces up. They have almost a draft system. Now, the fact that Leinster are doing that tells you they're doing something right. The style of rugby is unique. It's entertaining. It's brilliant. And Farrell, to his undying credit, has said, I'm going to adopt that. I'm going to adopt that style. And even adopting the plays, adopting the calls. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is really smart coaching. And what have we seen since that time? We've seen nothing but great success. Nothing but great success. So anyone that gets in there and says, oh, well, I'm disappointed there's not enough Connacht or Ulster or Munster boys in there, if we follow that thinking, we'll fail. And do you want Ireland to fail because of that? We're Irish. You're not Munster. Once the green jersey comes on, the provinces dissolve. And that's the way you've got to look at it.
I've got one last one on this before we move on. It's not even a counter argument. One of the points that gets made is that Leinster and the IRFU, I think Gordon Darcy said that they were the schools Leinster and the IRFU have no real influence over the schools because the schools' funding comes from parents of the schools and the schools themselves in Leinster, and that's the main bulk supplier for the Leinster Academy. And obviously Leinster are doing great work to try and broaden the players who come through the academy, and they're doing much better at that. Is there a case for the IRFU funding schools in Connacht and Ulster and in Munster to a similar level to what the schools are being funded? I guess if we think that pathway is working, and it clearly is, as you point out, in Leinster, to model that again, to interfere in the process a little bit in Munster and Connacht, to try and get those schools to a similar level of funding, which is obviously very difficult because those schools don't really reveal exactly how much money they have. But certainly you could take a fairly educated guess about how many coaches they have, how many certain conditioned people they have, what access they have to facilities and all that kind of stuff, and say, okay, we're going to make 4 schools in Munster be the same and 2 schools in Connacht be the same, and we're just going to fund those directly and hope that we get the payback in years to come.
Oh, absolutely. I think if we address the first issue, everyone in Ireland thinks that it's unique, the school system here. It's not. It's exactly the same in Australia. It's exactly the same in New Zealand. New Zealand's worse. New Zealand, the schoolboy competitions fund everything, and they put out scholarships. They bring kids in from the Polynesian islands. To think that this school system here is unique is wrong. South Africa is almost identical. The only place that I know of that doesn't have it of the leading countries is France, where there's no sport in schools. It's totally driven by the clubs. So it is not a unique system. A. B. Yes, by all means, fund it. But if you go to a principal and say, oh, we're the IRFU, we want to give you money for your rugby program, quite often the principals will say, we're independent, we don't want anything to do with you. And I've seen that firsthand in Australia, and I've seen it firsthand in Ireland. That comes from a drive and determination of the leadership in the school. If it was accepted, absolutely, give the schools as much as they want, as much as they'll take. Give them, and here is what you give them. You give them education. You educate their coaches. You supply coaches. You educate their strength and conditioning staff. Give them equipment, all that sort of stuff. Absolutely, 100%. But again, the bubble that is Irish rugby, you're in fantasy land thinking that the school system in Ireland is unique. It is not. And think that the money in the school system in Ireland is unique. It is not. It is exactly the same in Australia, South Africa and New Zealand, because I've been in those systems and seen it firsthand. But let me put one more thing. It is a fabulous system. So now we've got here's the other thing, Ger, I think that we've left out. There is competition. And Andy Farrell has made competition within that squad. But now you've got competition within the provinces. And if the other provinces are feeling left out and behind, what do? you get off your backside and you start working to beat Leinster. So that's what we've got to have in competition. We've got to have that competition in the schools as well. The other schools, provincial schools are behind. Get your act together, start working, get competitive and go for it. And look for funding. If that's what you need, absolutely, take it. Search for it. I used to only wear a tie when I was coaching when I was after funding. I put a coat and tie on and I go after funding. Money is the root of all evil and the base of all progress. So if you have to get money to get forward, get off your ass and go and get it. But to me, that's not the answer right now. It may be in certain schools. The answer is the technical and tactical aspect of what's being coached in the provinces outside of Leinster. And that to me, is the core area of where they're behind.
Matt, I just have two questions, both sort of leading into the World Cup particularly and around that tactical and technical side as well. Post Six Nations, and obviously the conversation now starts to turn about how we're going to win the World Cup. The subtleties of the game plan that we've had over the course of Six Nations and the execution of it, the little delayed passes, the use of the blind side, all those little things that countries from around the world are going to be looking at now and jotting, that the best coach is going to be jotting those down. Can we refresh that playbook? Is that the game plan now that comes into the World Cup, or how concerned would you be about how much of our hand we've shown?
I don't think there's anyone around the world that's playing the two of clubs at the moment. Everyone's playing their best hand. I wouldn't be that concerned because the beauty of this team and the way Farrell's done this, and particularly in bringing in Paul O'Connell, is they can maul very well. They've got a great kicking game. They've got a very, very good kicking percentage for penalties. Their set play is absolutely top shelf. They can score from set plays, and they can vary their attack so much that you really don't know what they're going to do. Like, you can't guarantee. So they went back on the short side there. They did that for a reason, because they saw a weakness in the English defence. So if you watch the English defence, I'll come back a bit. The theory on hitting England midfield and going back to short side has been around for 30 years, right? That has always, because England want to take you on. They want a pitch battle, right? So don't give you, and number one philosophy on tactics, give the opposition what they don't want. What do they want us to do? Well, let's not do that. What do they not want us to do? England never want you to come at them down the short side. They just don't, because their defensive systems, and this year, if you watch the first tackle, 4 players go around, keep going. We call it on the keep go around the same way. So they're short on the blind side the whole time. Jamie George has been left on the blind side the whole tournament. They got their defensive system has been shocking all tournament, and they've been offside all tournament, I might add, and they were offside again on Saturday night and weren't penalised. So Ireland came back to short side on Saturday because they saw a weakness in the opposition. Ireland, Sheehan's first try, they scored that because they saw a weakness in the set play defence. So that what Ireland are doing is really smart. They're identifying weaknesses and then they're going after them. What do they do against France from the restart? They did that beautiful move. They saw a hole in the French defensive system off tackle one, off a dropout. Like, it's so smart, Adrian. Like, you just got to applaud them. You look back and go, wow, why'd they do that? And then when we go back after they do it and you see why they did it, you just go, really smart play. So they'll have some, and here we have to put in, every defensive system ever invented, ever practiced has a weakness. There's no perfect defensive system. So why are they playing? Let's come back. Why are they playing the way they're playing? Because they're getting really fast ball, really LQB they call it, lightning quick ball. You get it at a ruck. You get your ruck speed down around a second and a half. Rushing defence can't cope with that. It's not organised. Can't get back and forward fast enough. So why they're playing this really helter-skelter, it seems, type of game, and it's not helter-skelter, but a really rapid pace game, is to stop rushing defences. England play a rushing defence. England couldn't get their defence going well enough to do it. So that's the reason they're playing at this pace. So why France playing at pace? Why New Zealand, Australia, and now Argentina? Why are they all trying to play this high-pace game? Because defensive systems can't cope with the pace. So I would counter what you're saying, which is a very valid argument, I'm not dismissing the argument, but the counter argument is you don't know what tactic we're going to play on any given day. You don't know how we're going to do this. You don't know where we're going to attack. So we again, give me some proof. Okay, roll back. They did their work on Van der Merwe, that he's an emu, not an eagle. What do I mean by that? He's fast on the ground, but he can't fly. Emus can't fly. So when they came on, as soon as Jamison Gibson Park came on, they had a box kick. And they box kicked right on to Van der Merwe in the corner near the try line. It was a plan because our winger was in place. Mac Hansen was in place to chase that ball. He should have been out in the open side off a line out. He wasn't. He was on the blind side. Hansen goes through. They know Van der Merwe doesn't jump or can't jump for the ball and catch it. He stays on the ground. What did he do? Hansen's about 5 inches shorter. He just jumps up, taps the ball back. 5 phases later, we score a try. That's how smart they are. So, and let me come back to another part. There is zero guarantees we're going to win the World Cup. They're in the shockingly hard half of the pool. The pool is the World Cup draw is ridiculously biased, and Ireland are on the tough side with South Africa, New Zealand, and France. If I got my Australian hat on, Australians they've got such an easy path to a semi-final. They've got Wales in their pool, England and Argentina on the other side. So their quarter-final, if they can win their pool, their quarter-finals is much, much easier than anything Ireland are going to produce to get to a semi-final. Now, once they get to a semi-final, it's a different kettle of fish. But Ireland, to make the semi-final, have a far harder path. So we haven't got any guarantees at the World Cup. But this is the most prepared, the best prepared Irish side in World Cup history. This is the best opportunity Ireland have as far as team preparation goes. And we're not basing this on hope like on past World Cups. I was actually saying the opposite. People didn't like me saying it. I think, you've got no chance, guys. I was telling you last World, you've got no chance. You're not anywhere near it. Oh, no, we got Joe, we got this, we got that. And you just wasn't. You weren't prepared. World Cups are won 18 months out. And Ireland have got themselves now 9 months out, but Ireland started this 18 months ago. That's when this World Cup preparation really gets me excited. No guarantees, but they got a really, really good shot. And that is based on evidence, not on just hope.
What were the warning signs 18 months out the last time or in the build-up to the last one that you were spotting, Matt, that made for uncomfortable listening to Irish people in the build-up 4 years ago?
And 8 years ago too, Ger, and 12 years ago.
Thanks, man.
Want to go back to 87? I talk to Willie Anderson about it all the time. Look, every World Cup, I think the Six Nations and has a lot to do with it. There is that much pressure to win the Six Nations that they just don't blood people. Joe took a tour group to Australia and they won the series, and they put far too much emphasis on winning the series and not enough emphasis on developing players. I was working with Ian Madigan a couple of weeks ago, just a gentleman, lovely guy, fantastic rugby player. And when Ian came on at the World Cup, when Johnny Sexton got injured 2 World Cups ago, Ian's is a fabulous footballer, but he hadn't been given enough opportunities in a green jersey to be prepared for that, completely prepared for what was thrown at him. Paul O'Connell was injured. We hadn't prepared our backup players with enough time to be ready. So the theory on World Cups is, everyone in your squad has to have around 20 caps, or between 20 and 30 caps. If you need that experience. The feeling is you're not comfortable at international level till around your 10th to 15th cap. The pace of the game is so different. The crowd is so much bigger. The noise, you can't communicate. There's all these other things. The build-up, everything is different coming from provincial rugby, with the possible exception of playing in Heineken Cup finals. So, and again, this is what Ireland didn't do. What have they done this time? What has Farrell done this time? He's taken the development team to New Zealand. He's sent development teams to South Africa. He's invited New Zealand over. And at times they've copped a hiding. And that's what you've got to do with development teams. But it gives players opportunities to fail and to learn. He's then, when this Six Nations forced upon them in some ways, you've had Sexton out, you've had Furlong out, Burns been out, Henshaw's been out, Bundy was out for a while. So we've had to rely on another group of players who have been magnificent and have delivered. So all of a sudden we've got depth charts, as we call it, in each position, where if Tom O'Toole comes on, before we would have been, oh, gee, can this guy do it? And Tom would be saying in his own head, because he's a human being, I don't know if I can do it. Tom O'Toole's back at his home tonight with this self-belief, knowing if I get that opportunity at the World Cup, I know I'm ready. Now, what's Tom saying? I'm after Finlay Bealham. I want Finlay Bealham's place on the bench. We've got competition in each position. So all those factors have never been done in the past. And the second part is, they're playing a style of rugby that's successful. The day England beat Ireland in the first game at the Aviva in 2019, we were finished. And I said it at the time, we were finished. People had figured us out because rushing defence, slow ruck ball brought rushing defence into play. And that day, England rushed us off the park, and we were rushed off the park for the rest of the year. So defence was dominating. That is not the case at the moment. And the tactics that are successful at schoolboy and provincial are now successful at international level. New Zealand, France, and Australia and Argentina are copying those tactics, and they're having great relative success with them. France in particular scare me, right? France are the one that they scare me. They're playing. I don't know if we've got time, but they overtrained. Galtier overtrained France for the first 6 weeks of the Six Nations. That was pretty much known, that he didn't taper for any game up to the Scotland game, that he pushed them at training, made them tired, wanted them fatigued going into games to test their mentality. After the Scotland game, they've rested, they've had some drinks, they've had a fun time, and look what they've done. They have been unbelievable in Twickenham and unbelievable again in Paris. The two of the tries against the Welsh will go down as pretty much all-time classics. They're the ones that are going to be brought out 20 years in the future. They are just staggering tries, and the one at the Aviva. France scare the daylights out of me. I've got a lot of confidence about everyone else, but France are going to be at home for a year. How good's that? They got every game at home for a year now. They are a great side. But Ireland have proved that they can step into the ring with any of the heavyweights and win. So it's a good spot.
This is why us not winning the right to host this World Cup was actually, kind of important in the end. But that's an entirely different kettle of fish, an entirely different set of rugby politics that maybe we won't get into this morning, Matt.
Well, we can thank our Celtic cousins for all that. So let's repay the favour for the next 10 years and we come down the bottom of a ruck.
Absolutely, Matt. Good stuff. Thanks a million.
See you guys. Good to talk to you.
Cheers. It is butterfly chaos theory where Scotland not voting for us. Imagine if the World Cup was in Ireland now, right? Notwithstanding all the political blah, blah, blah and the problems. Games at Croke Park, games in Ravenhill, games in Redeveloped. I don't know, would there be some in the Gaelic grounds? And France would have to come to Ireland to play us. We'd be playing South Africa in Dublin.
I'd still be very, very worried about France. He's absolutely spot on. He's got good clarity around the various kettles of fish, including the French one. And I look at it. It is a different ballgame when you're going to play them there. There's no question about it. But it's just a self-belief. The one area that we'll get into, we've a few months to get into it on. But it feels like the 33-man squad is going to come from you've had to play it in that Six Nations now to make the 33-man squad. If
all of our second rows were to get injured, you can see that there's probably a pathway for some players to make it. But if all of our fullbacks were to get injured, you'd be like, no, they're going to find somebody who has played for us.
we the pre-Six Nations. Oh my God, Joey Carberry has been left out of the squad. I mean, when does that name last come up in a conversation about what Ireland are doing? And you have to assume that sort of post-Six Nations, he's thinking, well, that's no matter what I do between now and then, this goose is cooked.
I brought that up with Quinny on Monday, and he was like, actually, there's room there for so Ross Byrne's grip on that spot isn't nailed down.
You think?
Now, he's obviously going to have a big opportunity against Ulster in Dublin in, is it 2 weeks, in the Champions Cup quarter-final, and because Sexton's injury, I think that's one of those opportunities that he's going to have to grab. I'd say if Munster were to go and reach a final of a Heineken Cup off the back of brilliant out-half play from Joey Carberry, then he's straight back in. Do you know?
Wow.
Still, because they know him really well.
I look at it. It is an interesting conversation that has no exact answer to it. But I would lean on the side of he's he's not going to make it.
Michael wants to know what's the mood. 100%. Like it'd be a complete fluke at this stage. Yeah, I'm not saying that Munster are going to go and win the Hurling Cup. What's the mood in the OTB office like? Asks Michael. Tense.
Thanks for asking. A great question.
Schmidt's a great coach, did an unbelievable job for Ireland, but he would be a disaster for New Zealand. Too restrictive, says Daniel Casey. I feel really bad for Joey Carby. He's a shifty lad, definitely more of a Leinster player, and maybe couldn't have been our best full back. He was sent out to be a number 2 to Sexton. Obviously it's backfired. I think Schmidt is a little more likely to become a technical director type role. I think his coaching style is wrong for current rugby rules, says Quirky 1980. I'm not sure about restrictive, says Flying Hellfish 99. Claremont and Leinster lit it up under him prior to Schmidt. The game plan was give the ball to Ferris or O'Brien. Colin McCarthy says, bit of Captain Hindsight going on here. Plenty of people in the media thought Joe Schmidt was the best thing since sliced bread for a long time. How many people predicted Farrell will get us to this level? Okay, whatever. Schmidt gave every player in both club and country a belief that we could be competing with the best, an invaluable foundation for our country, says Quirky 1980. Look, those wins against New Zealand, obviously another staging post along the way. So for sure. Okay, loads of people saying he wasn't a control freak, etc. It needed to be controlled to develop the players and the standard. Dublin GA did exactly the same with Pat Gilroy, and then Jim Gavin took it on. I think Jim Gavin gave the players some certain freedom to play it as they saw it, or certainly some players anyway. It's 8:30 this morning, time for to turn our attention to the unstoppable juggernaut that is Arsenal at the top of the Premier League. We're going to do that in just a minute. If you have views on football, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180. We're back with Arseblog's Andrew Mangan after these.
OTB AM,
the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. The Koigig Pod on Off the Ball.
I'm grimacing because it was such an opportunity. Possession-wise, I thought they were good, but they didn't have the cutting edge, and they don't have Sam Kerr.
I feel like if you're a referee, you know, you're watching a player for that sort of thing, and the fact that she's just continually being allowed to do it says a lot about the state of the refereeing in the game.
Keep up to date with all the WSL action every Tuesday and subscribe to the feed in the OTB Sports app now. OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
Andrew Mangan of Arseblog is with us. Andrew, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you guys?
What's the mood in the camp?
It's pretty good, have to say. I was over for the game on Sunday, and there's just an incredible sense of optimism and belief around the stadium before the game, after the game. Not verging over into anything like arrogance, because I think people understand there's a long way to go still, 10 games and a lot to play for. But, you know, how could you not be in a good mood sitting 8 points clear at the top of the Premier League table at this point of the season? It's
such a weird season too, with the World Cup break in the middle of it. So, I'm sure the level of excitement when the team started to play well was great. I was like, oh, we could be a top 4 team. And then the World Cup happens and it's like, we're still top of the table and the run of fixtures isn't that bad. We could still be top at Easter. So at what point do you teeter from not arrogance but into a sense of belief that actually this is the year where something magical is happening? It's
a really good question. I think some of the big games this season have been a demonstration of the progress that Arsenal have made. They beat Liverpool, they beat Tottenham home and away, they beat Manchester United at home. You know, the results that in previous seasons might just have gone against Arsenal have gone with us. And post World Cup, I think the big worry was how are we going to cope without Gabriel Jesus, because he was so important and so transformative, and was that injury going to have a significant effect on the team and its ability to get results? We were 5 points clear before Gabriel Jesus got injured. We were 5 points clear when Gabriel Jesus came back. So I think that sense that there is a perhaps more depth to the squad than people might have given Arsenal credit for was another big, I guess, a positive, a thing that makes you believe that perhaps this could happen this season.
The transfer dealings have been absolutely brilliant, particularly from the end of last season to this point. The two Premier League winners who come in, Jesus, obviously, and Zinchenko, but then in the January window, to pick up the players they did in the manner they did, where they're kind of like massively undervalued by their current club for whatever reason. One's a falling out, one is because there's 6 million players at Chelsea, and for those players to just add immediately options to the starting team. It's very rare for that to happen in January.
Yeah, because Arsenal were after Mykhailo Mudryk, as we know. I mean, it's possible they could have got him and he could be having the same kind of difficulty that he's having at Chelsea. I do think perhaps Chelsea being a bit of a basket case at the moment is playing a part in that. But certainly Trossard coming in and providing assists and giving more depth up front when Nketiah got injured, his contribution has been absolutely sensational, really. And I think as well, Jorginho wouldn't have been everyone's favourite. Arsenal have done some deals with Chelsea in the past that haven't gone down particularly well. You wouldn't say those players are favourites in any way, but he's come in, and what he's allowed Thomas Partey to do is just sort of sit out a couple of games and make sure that he's ready for the big ones in the Premier League.
And like for all that sort of one of the non-Hollywood names, Andrew and Ben White, it almost sort of reminds me of the Johnny Sexton been left out of the Lions squad bit, where it sort of has seemed to give him an unbelievable kick in his career. And you know, if he continues to play like he did against Palace at the weekend, this is a guy who's going to be in a lot of England squads to come. But being left out might be exactly what sort of Arsenal fans will delight in over the next couple of months.
I don't think Ben White is out of the England squad because of his quality as a footballer. I think there's something else going on there. He's probably been the best English right back in the Premier League this season, and for a guy who played all of last season at centre half, it's been amazing to watch how he has developed and that relationship he's got with Bukayo Saka on the right hand side. If you asked me this morning, am I grateful that he's out of the England squad? Absolutely. I don't want him anywhere near it. I'm looking at Haaland being taken out of the Norway squad right now and thinking, Arsenal could do with a bit of that. Take Saka out, take Odegaard out if you can do it. But you know, Ben White has been absolutely brilliant. He's a sort of vindication of the transfer policy that Arsenal have undertaken in the last couple of years. There were a lot of eyebrows raised when Arsenal paid Brighton £50 million for him, sort of similar to the money they paid for Aaron Ramsdale. Nobody's batting an eyelid now. These two guys and others have been absolutely sensational.
Who's responsible for the transfer policy? You know, obviously when Liverpool won their title, they went and signed Alisson and Van Dijk, and it was transformative. Arsenal's has been less two world-class players immediately injected into the team, but it's been a series of really good bits of business done over a protracted period of time. Is there a similar style committee at Liverpool, or who has the biggest influence?
I think they had to take stock at one point because they'd done, you know, going back to Chelsea deals, they'd done a deal for Willian, which really didn't work out. And it felt a bit like the club were always trying these short-term fixes. And I think across the board, at board level, from the owners to Edu, who is the sporting director, technical director, Mikel Arteta, they put in place a plan. They had to do something different. So they recruited young players. They recruited players from the Premier League. Developing a team, you know, a young team that could grow together. It's probably grown quicker than most people would have expected, but I think they just got to a point where they said, look, we have to do things a little bit differently, bit more intelligently, smarter. Don't throw bad money at players who really don't have any significant future at the club. So the short-term deals have gone out the window. I mean, you could look at what we've done in January and say Trossard and Jorginho aren't exactly long-term signings, but they've come after signing a load of players in the 20, 21, 22-year-old bracket, which makes it easier to make those signings because you're not as reliant on them. And I think the core of the group is still really young and growing together and has lots of room for improvement.
As part of that, it feels like there was pressure last year externally on the manager for a period of time, but from what you're saying, it feels like there was alignment at board level and within everywhere that essentially their guy was Arteta and they were going to allow him to exercise the collective plan. Absolutely.
I mean, it's probably forgotten, but before the end of last season, Mikel Arteta signed a new contract. That was before the race for the top four was over. Ultimately, Arsenal didn't finish in the top four. They were pipped to it by Tottenham, but Arteta had been given the backing of the club before that. So he very much is the guy that they see as the future. He's done an incredible job since he came in. There have been ups and downs, of course, but when you consider everything Arsenal as a club have been through over the last number of years with the end of Arsene Wenger, Unai Emery, all of that, the club it's like night and day now. Night and day. The difference in how people feel about the way the club is run is just off the charts.
We were chatting in advance of the game against Sporting, wondering that, like, ultimately, if you don't have anything else to play for this season, really, than the Premier League, is it a disaster if they were to go out? Maybe the manner in which they went out is going to leave a very sour taste. And I know as an Arsenal fan, you're like, I want my trophies, give me my trophies. But at the same time, if you're cold and calculating as the manager, you're going, okay, 10 games, if we just perform at the level we know we're capable of, we're actually going to be champions at the end of the season.
I can only speak for myself. There were Europa League exits which were more painful than this one. It has to be said, because that was basically the be-all and end-all of the season. The Europa League was a chance for a trophy, a European trophy. Arsenal don't have too many of those, so there was a lot invested in that. And then, of course, there's the double prize of getting into the Champions League by virtue of winning the Europa League. So there were a lot of eggs in the Europa League basket in previous seasons. This time around, it's much more easy to compartmentalize a European exit because there is something else to play for, something bigger to play for. And Manchester City, who are the title rivals, are in the FA Cup. They're in the Champions League. They've got the Premier League to deal with. They have a big squad and they have all the experience of going deep into these competitions and performing at a high level. But I think if you're asking, the Europa League maybe this season was a chance to stress test the Arsenal squad. Was it strong enough to compete properly across two fronts? Maybe the exit tells you that no, it's not quite there yet. There's still work to do in terms of squad building and recruitment and things like that. So in the context of where we are and what's to play for, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to be out of the Europa League because, like you say, there's 10 Premier League games. It gives Mikel Arteta and the players more time to organise, to prepare, to recuperate from the intensity of these last 10 games, which is going to be tough going, I think, because there's some difficult fixtures in there. But you would rather, let's say, play Liverpool away without having to deal with going to Juventus either side of that.
You were there to see the concession against Palace the weekend, Andrew, you said at the top, and there's been so much spoken about the set piece concessions by Arsenal this season. I don't know if there's like a bit of PTSD that dates back to the last little blip at the start of last month and that Tarkowski goal. Like, it does feel like I almost don't view it so much as a set piece thing as it's been a bit vulnerable from a wide ball at times. They can look a little bit at sixes and sevens, despite the quality that you've already outlined that exists in that area of the pitch. What's your view on it?
I think it's something that will probably be a worry for Mikel Arteta. Over the international break, I think he'll probably sit down with his coaching staff and think about, how they can improve in that regard. It's one of those where it doesn't really matter when you've scored 4 at the other end. Letting one in is never good, but you can live with it because you've won 4-1, like you say, at Everton away, when you don't take your chances and you concede from a set piece. That can be really, really costly. So I think primarily it is just a bit of a period in the season where a few goals have gone in that way and it looks maybe a bit more serious than it is. But I don't think it's something the manager will take lightly because he's very much a perfectionist. He does look for his players to win every challenge, win every duel, win every header, and when they don't, he's not going to be happy. So he'll be looking at those things quite closely. But I think in general, Arsenal's defensive record and the ability from set pieces and those kinds of things has been pretty good for most of the season. So hopefully it's just a temporary thing.
Yeah, we need to improve that, was the words of Arteta, which I read in the aftermath of that. I was like, yeah, that's good. That's good information. Now, how the hell do you do that? Of course, is the next step. Can we ask you one about events up the road? I'm sure you're as much as you're delighting in everything that's happening in your own club at the minute. Tottenham's little implosion, I'm sure, is doing no harm as well. This feels to me to be a masterclass by Antonio Conte, because he's wangled away out the door where nobody's saying he's a particularly bad manager. I've seen him linked with Juventus this morning. This is a masterclass, isn't it?
Well, if you're asking me as an Arsenal fan what I think of it, it's pretty funny, to be honest, the way he went in on the players and went in on the owners of the football club. He wasn't pulling any punches. I think the best part about it is this crisis is happening while Tottenham are in the top 4. They've been in worse positions in their time, and who knows where it goes from here. But he did sound like a man who is just completely fed up. And I think, as funny as it is, objectively, it's very difficult to argue with a lot of the stuff that he said about the history of the Tottenham, if you remember Chiellini making that comment in the past. So the more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, there's greater focus on what Arsenal need to do between now and the end of the season, but we're 20 points clear of them, and that's always a happy place to be.
The women's team are up against Bayern Munich in a Champions League quarter-final. It's part of their history that they are actually Champions League winners. So they go into games like this with a greater sense of expectation, and I think there's a good chance that they might be able to come through this tie.
Hopefully. I mean, obviously the loss of Beth Mead and Vivian Miedema, is a real blow to any team to lose two players of that calibre and that quality. But there is a real belief within this squad. There's a good togetherness. The manager is doing a good job, and they're in action tonight. Fingers crossed. They can bring home another European trophy. Like I said, Arsenal's for its history and everything else, the record in Europe isn't as good as it should be. So if the women can add to the trophy collection, then that'd be great.
Andrew, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
It's Andrew Mangan of Arseblog there, giving us his thoughts this morning on, as I said, the unstoppable juggernaut of Arsenal. John Duggan is with us. John, good morning to you.
Ger and Adrian, how's it going?
The Arsenal fans are enjoying what's going on at Spurs at the moment.
Oh, let's go Erling Haaland, what? Let's catch you in the last game of the season and have the devastation for Arsenal. So let's bring that on.
That's the best.
That's the best you can do?
That's the best hope that Spurs fans have at the moment?
No. Look.
Do you want Conte gone now, or would you rather...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go. Get out of here. And look, he wants that himself as well. If you were on 100 grand a year, you'd be on a good wage, right? It would take you 150 years to be on that wage to earn what Antonio Conte earns a year at Tottenham. And unless you have a Montgomery Burns chamber, you're not going to be living 150 years off 100 grand a year to make 15 million a year and put out a team that he did. I know he wasn't in the country, but put out the team that he did against Sheffield United in the FA Cup when the club has one trophy in 22 years. And even leaving Harry Kane on the bench for over an hour.
It would be a different feel if they were in the top four and in a FA Cup semi-final.
Big time.
You'd think it's a game at Wembley. It's a chance to... The team knows how to win one-off big games. They've won one-off big games this season.
Yes, against Manchester City at home, the champions. They beat Chelsea at home comfortably, and he just threw everybody under the bus and didn't take any responsibility. His football is turgid. It's not easy on the eye, and also there hasn't been an Italian winner of a Champions League in 13 years. He's done great stuff initially, but he's never brought a team beyond a quarter-final of a Champions League.
What about your Cheltenham experience? Have you come down off the high heights?
Look, it's always great to be there, lads. It's just a privilege to be there. It's lovely to be there on Gold Cup Day, and to be an Irish person and on Patrick's Day at Cheltenham was pretty awesome. And then to see Galopin Deschamps produce such a brilliant performance in the Gold Cup, and one of the best rides you'll ever see by Paul Tennant. Some great stories during the week, where there's John Gleeson, the Leaving Cert student, winning the bumper, or Henry de Bromhead speaking so openly about the rough time he's had, and Rachel Blackmore winning for him on Honeysuckle, and Constitution Hill winning the champion hurdle and hopefully going over fences now. And it was just an amazing week, and 18 Irish winners is always something to be proud of, given we're in a golden age of the sport.
Speaking of a strong Irish backroom team, Paddy McCarthy's going to be the assistant manager
at Palace.
Dean Kiley's retaining his position as the goalkeeping coach. Roy Hodgson has been officially confirmed as the new manager at Crystal Palace this morning. Back to the future, baby.
That's it. They're only 3 points above the drop zone, and they don't score enough goals. So Roy will have to try and get them scoring a few goals. But
does a man you want to inspire a team to score goals? Hang on a second. It's definitely not Roy Hodgson.
Like even a Harry Redknapp or somebody would have been somebody who would have given a bit of a jolt.
Yeah. Didn't get to meet Harry in the end at Cheltenham, but I know he was there. But yeah, look, it's fascinating to see. It's really the Hunger Games, isn't it, down the bottom of the Premier League at the moment? And there's about 6 or 7 teams there that could still go down and still stay up. It's very hard to call who will the 3 be, you know.
Anything else going on today?
Well, I hope they get De Zerbi in at Spurs, by the way. Love to see him there. They've had 10 permanent coaches in Daniel Levy's time at the club. So not only does Conte need to go, but Daniel Levy needs to go, and the club needs to be sold. And that's my final word on the matter.
A bit of a wish list there.
What else is going on? Well, Katie Taylor obviously fighting in Dublin on the 20th of May against Chantal Cameron. Great to see her speak to Aisling yesterday. Johnny Sexton a dead for Leinster's game against Ulster on Saturday week with a groin problem. I think there seems to be obviously a lot of confidence that Ross Byrne can step up. Scott Robertson's got the New Zealand job. Breakdance ahoy. Don't know if you guys have ever breakdanced.
Not a chance, JD.
Yeah. I can moonwalk, but...
I've seen your moonwalk. It's very impressive.
Yeah. Obviously well-fueled. Talk about revamping the Hurling League. But the problem with the Hurling League is effectively the round robin is the Hurling League. In Munster.
No one cares about it, yeah.
In Munster and Leinster. So that's what generally is going on.
All right.
Obviously no matches. And the Ireland jerseys cost 80 quid.
All right. And there's not a lot of love apart from Adrian Barry for the new Ireland jersey so far this morning. Good stuff, JD.
Right,
thanks a million for that. More from John across the week, of course, and on Saturday on Off the Ball on News Talk at 8:50 this morning, though. We're delighted to welcome Ugo Monye, ex-England and Harlequins, to the show. Ugo, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, we're in the nice period where we're reflecting on how we managed to bounce from the success of the Grand Slam into the World Cup. Slightly different environment, I suspect, in English rugby at the moment.
It is. I guess it's a period of reflection. Obviously, a disappointed Six Nations, certainly not the results or some of the performances that we'd wanted, but bounced straight back into the Gallagher Premiership, Heineken Cup. So for the teams competing in that, I guess a sense of excitement. Harlequins play Saracens at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium this weekend. So that's a big game off the back of playing multiple internationals. So hopefully the players can bounce back into that, get comfortable in their club environments and start reaching the peaks of the performances which we know they're capable of.
That's split personality that you must have if you're an England international, where the club has such a power and a draw over you and you've got such responsibility to it. Is there any way for Steve Borthwick to surf that and still produce an English international team that can compete with France and Ireland and New Zealand and South Africa at the moment?
Yeah, I think that. And some people might think, well, you're deluded by thinking that. But if you're to go through the players and look at perhaps not some of the performance in the Six Nations, but the potential of the players, then I'm finding it difficult to not suggest that they can still be really competitive. And having a 2.5-3 month pre-season, I know there's only a few warm-up matches to go, but I think that period during that pre-season this summer is going to be critical. Getting everyone on the same page, totally understanding the philosophy. Steve Borthwick hasn't had time. He just hasn't, and I think that's really clear to be able to state that when you look at Ireland and France, and they're at the end of their 4-year cycle, building towards this World Cup. Steve Borthwick, we're stepping into week 8 of it. And you can see that gap in terms of the performances, of course. But when I look at the individuals, when I look at their capability, when I look at what history has shown me from their performances, yes, they underperformed to their ability. But the question is, how can we get all of the players that are involved in English rugby at the moment and available to play in the World Cup, how can we get them touching, reaching their potential?
Hugo, your view on whether... I was going to ask you, are England better or worse off now than when Eddie Jones left, but I'm almost taking from what you're saying that it's sort of irrelevant in the sense that it's a work in progress.
I think so. The debate as to whether it's the right time for Eddie and Steve Borthwick or the rest of it, I think that's kind of been parked because our situation is our situation. So how do we get the very best out of it? And honestly, I put so much emphasis on that summer. Steve Borthwick said in the press conferences last weekend that they have to close that gap and they've got to learn and get that sense of cohesion quicker than any other international rugby team. You look at the kind of the top 5 nations and they have that sense of stability. Same coaches, same voices, a few different tweaks here and there, but they've had that consistency for 4 years. England obviously don't have that. I look at Irish rugby at the minute, not just what Johnny Sexton, Andy Farrell and the rest of the team did, but I look at what they're doing in the 20s. So that connectivity of pathway performance, which ultimately has provided them 2 Grand Slams across the last 5 rounds, which is unbelievable. That's that's exceptional. English rugby doesn't have that model domestically and then going into the international game. So we have to find our own way. I think France have done a remarkable job since 2019. Fabien Galtier came into that coaching staff, overlooking it, knowing that he was going to take the reins the minute that World Cup finished. And he's been embedded there, brought in the likes of Sean Edwards, and developed a game plan, as well as having some extraordinary players like Antoine Dupont, who surely go down as one of the greatest of our generation. And it feels hard even saying that, but he's certainly worthy of it, considering he's still only 26, isn't he?
Yeah, it's sensational, eh? And like, look, the French, I would, on home soil, I'd make the French the favourites to win the World Cup. They did have a big power struggle with the clubs where they got a bit more access to the players, and they obviously have rules in place about the number of GIF players who are qualified who are allowed to play in the top 14. English rugby still seems to be kind of at war between the clubs and the RFU, or if there's ever a peace, it's always a very tenuous peace.
Yeah, I wouldn't say English rugby was at war with one another at the minute. So you've got Simon Massey-Taylor, who's the CEO of Premiership Rugby. He used to work at England Rugby. So having that understanding, being on both sides of the fence, I think really helps the conversation and the relationship. And there is a strong relationship. Then you've got Bill Sweeney, the CEO of English Rugby. He obviously understands that. And we're currently actually negotiating a PGA, the Professional Game Agreement. That's going to be critical as to what that looks like for the success of English rugby going forward. I do think everyone understands where we are. There's still the legacy of COVID, which some clubs are suffering from. And we've seen some of the governance within the game hasn't quite been where it needed to be. We've lost 2 clubs in the Gallagher Premiership. So I think when things go badly, there's a real sense of collaborations, and that's with the owners within the Gallagher Premiership. That's with the CEO in English Rugby. And if you can connect the dots and everyone understands how one can help another, then we should get to a good agreement which will give a platform and the infrastructure for the game to grow and reach its potential also.
I was unaware that the PGA negotiations, is that a process that's coming to an end? Is it like, how long do you think before one is publicly announced?
So the PGA agreement, to the best of my knowledge, comes to an end at the end of the season. So they're in negotiations for a new contract. The terms of what that's going to look like, which would ordinarily be during a World Cup cycle, could be 4 years. So yeah, all of that's happening right now. And so the deep dive into what needs to be done. And by the way, the Gallagher Premiership, I work in it, I see it every single week, and it blows my mind as to the quality and the level of competitiveness on the pitch. The international game, obviously England haven't been where they've needed to be since 2019, and we're trying to work on that now. But how can one complement the other? And so those conversations, those contracts, the terms of references and details within it are certainly been worked on right now.
Just on a more short-term issue, Ugo, just around the out-half selection, like looking at Andy Farrell at the weekend, he really looks like a wartime consigliere. Like, he's prowling around the pitch, he's such a presence, he's such a leader, he's a bloody good player. I think I'm right to say you were one of the ones that was calling for Schmidt pre-France. You can bring clarity to that if I'm wrong on that, and then just your view on, like, it feels like he might be the right player at the right time for England for now, and maybe Schmidt is the more sort of intermediate term replacement.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, and it's one that's coveted so many headlines, column inches, and I almost feel it's an answer that it's a question that needs to be answered, but also it kind of acts as a bit of a distraction, I think. So we take Marcus Smith played against France. I think you could have had Dan Carter at the peak of his power 2005 with Jonah Lomu on the wing, and England still wouldn't have won. It wasn't about the performance of the 10, in my opinion. It's our inability to be able to get on the front foot and show that level of physicality. You can play any style of rugby you want to play, but the fundamentals of the game in the amateur era today, and perhaps in the next 20 years, will forever remain the same. It's a contact collision sport, and if you don't win contacts or collisions, you can't play any type of rugby. So the debate around who plays at 10, I think, is a secondary or tertiary question. The first thing is, like, how do we want to play? The minute you understand how you want to play, then you implement players within that system. You have to look at who your best players are and put a game plan that suits them the best. But once you have sheer clarity or clear clarity, actually they say the same thing. Once you have clarity, over how you want to play and the direction of travel, then I think the players fit into that system. Any player who wants to play for Ireland understands, I think, what it takes to play for Ireland, whether you're in the forwards or the backs. And you can go for all the different positions, but can't you? In the front row, I think you need to quite clearly be a brilliant scrummager, but you look at the whole pack and they're all ball playing forwards. It's really obvious as to how they want to play. So if you're sat outside of that group, you need to work on your skills, you need to work on your fitness to be able to fit into that. And England, whilst they've had a look and experimented to a relative extent across the last 5 matches, are still exploring, I think at least, how they want to play. Once they get that clarity, I think the players then fit into the systems.
Whose vision is it for that? Is that Borthwick's vision? And are there lessons, obviously having watched them very closely at Leicester, do you expect it to be similar, or was Leicester specific to the environment at Leicester?
Yeah, I think Steve Borthwick got asked the question before the start of the tournament, can domestic game plans or the way in which you work at club level work at international level? I think historically it has. You go back to 2007, South Africa winning it with a good set piece, good defence, good kicking game. But I think in this World Cup, you need more. Ireland have a good kicking game. They have a very good kicking game. They have a dominant set piece, and they've got the best defence. Simon Easterby doesn't get enough credit for the job he's doing. In fact, for as much as we can talk about Ireland's attack, it's actually Ireland's defence which is their standout performer. So there's that. But on top of all of that, Ireland's unbelievable ruthless efficiency when they get into the areas that matter, the 22, they come away with points. So there you go. For France, they do all those fundamental things very well, but they have this wild X factor and X factor players. New Zealand will have it, South Africa have it, Australia, Argentina, Scotland have it. So I think you just need more. I think Steve Borthwick is a very, very diligent man, super bright, loves his analysis, a proper student of the game. He'll realise that England will have to develop their game to compete with the best teams in the world, because you've only got to watch them and see what they produce. And you've got to understand, to be able to match or go one better, that you need to have a game plan which isn't identical to that, but certainly has aspects which can really challenge it.
Yeah, you actually are coming across quite positive about the future here. Is that largely on the basis of what you think might be able to happen in that window where, for an unbroken period of time, everybody who is in the England camp will be focused exclusively on England, which obviously happens so rarely for those?
Of course. I think it's quite understandable as a fan for your initial response to be highly emotional, right? England won 2 out of 5. That's not good enough. Everyone understands that and accepts that. But when you look at the potential, when you look at the players, when you look at the time they're going to have in camp, and in fact, when you look at their pool, you're thinking, hang on a second. I was chatting to Sam Warburton Sunday night, who was on Rugby Special, did the podcast with him after, and he said, people might think that I sound crazy, and by the way, he's a brilliant pundit. He said, I could see Wales get to a semi-final. But people would listen to that statement and go, what are you on about? Like, you won 1 game out of 5, but I get what he's saying. I think the pre-season, having significant time in camp, acts a bit of a leveller. You go into a Six Nations where you effectively have 10, 11 training sessions, and then you have to hit the ground running. And that's where I think Ireland take quite a leap on a lot of other teams. They always hit the ground running week 1 because they have 12 out of their 15 that come from Leinster. Leinster play a very similar, if not identical, way into which Ireland plays. So get that sense of cohesion is very easy. For Scotland, with 2 different teams, and you've got Finn from Paris coming in, takes a bit longer. With England, brand new coach, 10 training sessions coming from 11 different teams, trying to implement that one game plan. But when you have that undivided attention for 2.5, 3 months, where everyone can be on the same page. They're also bringing in Richard Wigglesworth, Aled Walters, who is the strength and conditioning coach for South Africa in their last World Cup campaign. Then you can see a sense of positivity. we're 5 months away, 6 months away from a World Cup. I'm certainly not going to sit in the camp that it's crisis, it's terrible. I accept where England are right now, but I'm excited about where England could potentially go.
I think it's obviously a brutal learning experience too. You mentioned Alan Waters there. I think he's at Munster before South Africa, so we're pretty familiar with him in this part of the world. But there was nobody overseeing the full strength and conditioning over the course of the Six Nations the way he will be when he comes in. I'm sure there was some influence, and they didn't have nobody doing it. But the previous guy left before the Six Nations. In retrospect, maybe if Borthwick had his time again, they might get somebody for more continuity and manage that transition a little bit better, because the players didn't look fit enough. They didn't look like they were at the level of Ireland or even France when those two teams played them. There was a little bit of a difference, but at international rugby that's significant. So it's a brutal introduction to the test environment for Borthwick, and the challenge for him now is to make sure that he's able to take all of the lessons on and sift through the stuff that's really important, which is the style and the forwards and the fitness and the tactics, and the stuff that's not that important about, like, ultimately the 10 decision will be made by who's best to implement the game plan on the field.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, let the main thing be the main thing. So figure out what that is, and then the details, I think, follow that. You have to have a framework, a game plan, and the one thing he really needs is time. Don't have a huge amount of it, but knowing the type of personality that Steve is, he's so consistent. The exact same as a player, like an absolute rugby student. Loved it, really diligent, and speak to anyone that's worked with him at Leicester. And it's one of those, when you're at England camp or international camp, you ask the players, how's the coach? Oh, he's great. Well, of course you're going to say it's great, but you speak to players that worked with him who aren't playing international rugby, and they swear by him. They really love the sense of clarity and purpose that he gives. Of course, it didn't manifest itself in terms of results, and he'd have been disappointed. But the one thing which you have to go through, whether it's good or bad, unfortunately some of the experience for England was bad, is that there's a real sense of honesty, because you can't hide from some of the performances. You can't hide after the France performance, can you? So you can kind of put away all the BS and just go, this is where we're at, this is where we need to get to. And the question that needs to be answered is, how do we take our game from where it currently is to where we think we can be? And that requires a good level of understanding, deep level of introspection and reflection, and then trying to communicate that with the group, which might look different come the summer, come the World Cup, because there's some big opportunities now for some players to get some game time under their belt. The domestic rugby doesn't replicate the international game. It just doesn't. But across the summer, with one of the most highly regarded fitness coaches in world rugby being in charge of that department, I think physically, fitness-wise, tactically, England will be absolutely on the money. But then the question is, will it still be good enough? Because every team, by the way, will have a 2.5 month, 3 month pre-season. You look at the Southern Hemisphere teams that go into the Rugby Championship, they play the highest level of international rugby. They play the Rugby Championship, go into mini camps, and then they're ready for a World Cup. So, they'd have sharpened their tools 100%. We'll have our World Cup war matches across the summer, and everyone, in terms of fitness, understanding, should be on a level playing field. But in terms of the development of a team, it takes longer than 7 weeks. It takes longer than a couple of months, and that's the gap which England have to close, and you can do that a number of ways.
We've all enjoyed the last few weeks. Here you go. We've been obviously celebrating events over the weekend, but in the Irish psyche we have a lot of World Cup PTSD, so we've spent the last 48 hours sort of talking ourselves away from the possibility of winning the thing. Are we going to win the thing?
I mean, it's hard to bet against Ireland right now. To achieve what they achieved at the weekend was truly remarkable and so fitting on so many different reasons. For Johnny Sexton, for his first kick and in his last game in the Six Nations, be the all-time point top scorer, I think is unbelievable. For the consistency that Ireland have shown is brilliant. But I think they'll take more out of their tour to New Zealand than they will from this Grand Slam winning. And that's not to take anything away from the Six Nations. to be 1 test down in a 3-test series away in New Zealand, having never done it before, that's brilliant. Ireland and some of those players have won Grand Slams before. They know what it takes. But with an eye on the World Cup, it's great to have in your muscle memory that you have the ability to do things that you've never done before. And if Ireland are to win a World Cup, that's exactly what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to get past the quarterfinals, which is something that's eluded them, semi-finals and final. And now they've got that muscle memory of, oh, well, we went to New Zealand, we lost the first test, we bounced back for the final 2, and there were injuries and we're still able to do it. I think it's remarkable. I also think the Southern Hemisphere will give us a bit of a rude awakening when the Rugby Championship starts. Remember us? Hey, we're New Zealand. We're quite good at rugby. South Africa, the same. Argentina, Australia. So I think that'd be competitive. But I'm just absolutely loving the narrative at the moment of, if you want to be the number 1 side in the world, you have to chase us up in the Northern Hemisphere. For so long, it's been, how do we get close to South Africa? How do we get close to New Zealand? And they'll be part of the conversation. But the world's looking at, how do we get close to Ireland? How do we get close to France? And that's great. We've not had someone win the World Cup for 20 years. And the stars are aligning a little bit with it being a Northern Hemisphere World Cup and number 1 and number 2 in the world occupying those positions, Ireland and France, that this may be the best opportunity we have to reclaim the William Webb Ellis and hold it up north for a little bit. That would be good.
Ugo, great to have you with us. Thanks a million, man. Cheers.
Cheers, take care.
So Ugo Monye there giving us his thoughts, and good to get the English perspective. It's a good point, actually. So whenever anybody mentions the series win in New Zealand, I'm like, yeah, but we lost the game. And if we were to lose like the quarter final, we don't get to play the same team again the next week, knowing everything we learned in the first one. But it's the bit there that it's like you're doing something you haven't done before. And also, like, they had to win the second test. It's a cup final because there's no other games really. The third game is irrelevant. And then you have to win the third game because it's a cup final. There's no other game. So I'm liking it. I'm listening, Ugo.
I'm loving his we should reclaim. So we're all aboard the Ireland train. Look, totally. The only thing that would make you slightly concerned is obviously the small margins, the tiny margins that sometimes, like, rugby's a strange sport because it doesn't take much in the end, really, you could end up putting 14 points in a team and it's like, oh, there was a big gap, and actually not a lot in reality.
Referees the ruck a certain way for half an hour and game's over. You've conceded 4 penalties and they scored 3 tries from a set piece, and you're like, well, we dominated the game. Like, no, you didn't. Well, we did, but no one listens. Right, Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of Off the Ball. New Braeburn locations are popping up every month. Visit applegreenstores.com/Braeburn to find your nearest Braeburn coffee experience. Some highlights on the Off the Ball podcast network for you today: Monday Night Rugby, the latest Koi Gig pod, and our latest football pod. You can follow us across our social channels. Make sure you subscribe to the OTB podcast network. After the break, Sarah Donovan on the weekend's hurling. First, Katie Taylor speaking with our own Aisling O'Reilly yesterday about her homecoming fight in the Three Arena.
It's crazy, really. It's been a long time coming for sure, and like I said, 22 fights in, we're finally talking about this. But there was a point where I was thinking this is never going to happen. So I'm so happy that it is signed and sealed now. Bringing pro boxing home, and we are a people who love this noble art. So and for a very small country, we're very, very good at it. So it's great to bring it home, and I expect to produce a great performance, and this could be the biggest night in my career.
Amazing. It was meant to happen in Croke Park. It's not happening now. It's going to be in the Three Arena. How did you feel about all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't let my mind go there, really. My job is to focus on the boxing part, and that's why I have a team of people around me. Their job is to focus on that part. I obviously will have absolutely loved to fight in Croke Park. It's our most iconic arena in 80,000 people, but here we are, the Three Arena it is, and I'm just happy to be fighting in front of my home crowd for the first time as a pro, and it's not some normal fights against an undisputed champion and an undefeated fighter. We could have chosen an easier route, but we wanted to bring a huge fight home for the fans.
You're listening
to OTB AM. Off the Ball.
Another goal.
Every time I turn around, he seems to be celebrating your goal.
Every time his dad sits back down in his chair, he scored again. He's up again with his mates. So it's City 6-0, 7-1 in the night. Again, they've put to dad in the crowd.
They just need to save some of their goals here, don't they?
Not at all.
Save them for when they need them.
Erling Haaland
is meant to be the difference in the Champions League. They want one when it's a tight semi-final.
He'll score one in a tight semi-final too.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
It's 9:14 this morning. We're turning our attention to hurling, and Sarah Donovan is with us to look back at the weekend that was. Sarah, not a lot of hurling on the telly over the weekend. Were you feeling a bit hard done by?
Struggled to find it, Ger. I'm a bit surprised, actually. I'm thinking at this stage, could RTE not have a football show and a hurling show? Because they're two completely different sports.
I mean, it's a radical idea here, but it is also a factor of the fact that so little is at stake in the hurling league. We know that for the managers, the individual matches and the players who are emerging, and I think is it Kilkenny, or sorry, Freudian slip, Galway have lost Ahi Burke. These things really, really matter, and they will have significant impact later on in the summer. But no one's going to remember who the league champions are when it comes around to All-Ireland hurling semi-final, Munster final, All-Ireland final.
Yeah, but if we look across the water, we've the Premier League, we've the FA Cup, we've the Carbo Cup. Like every game has merit, and every team has fans. So there was a place to watch Cork v Clare, I'd have watched it. If there was a place to watch, Limerick beat Westmeath, I'd have watched it. It's just, we follow hurling, we're passionate about hurling, and a 10-minute segment at the end of Sunday game on Sunday night wasn't enough for me. So
I suspect that GA Go is going to be the answer to that into the future, and that as that rolls out and as subscriber numbers grow, they'll find that it's actually worthwhile for them to put those games on, and they'll be able to know that pretty quickly. But the bits that we did see, what were your key takeaways? You watched the Kilkenny-Waterford game in full.
Yeah, I did. Look, Waterford are on a flight to Portugal today, so make of that what you will. Was that flight booked before Saturday? They're doing a training camp this week, but obviously they were missing a raft of players, and actually Kilkenny were without Richie Reid and Owen Murphy due to concussion protocols from the Dublin game. Waterford were without Austin Gleeson, Conor Prunty, Stephen Bennett, Mikey Kiley. It was two pretty depleted teams, right? It was a gritty game. The conditions were appalling again. Really wet ground. Players really struggled with even controlling the ball. But I suppose Kilkenny grounded out, and great late score from Alan Murphy, having been fouled, and took on the play Kilkenny style and managed to get the winner for Kilkenny. So I suppose Kilkenny will be happier, and looking at next week, they'll really fancy themselves against Cork.
Okay, well let's start with Kilkenny then, get a bit deeper into that. We didn't know what to make or what to expect of Kilkenny post Cody. What signs are you seeing of some kind of pattern about what their identity is going to be over the course of the rest of the year?
Well, they started really slowly. They only, I suppose, beat Antrim by 7 points in the first round of the league, and then we were watching them against Tip, and they didn't show up against Tip, so there was a bit of concern there. But obviously, as they've added quality back into the side, I suppose the likes of Owen Cody, the likes of John Donnelly, Billy Drennan have really shown up in the last 3 weeks, and I like their style of play. Conor Fogarty in the middle is really centering them. I think they've just found a rhythm again, and they were workmanlike against Waterford. And Waterford went ahead on Saturday by 3 points with about kind of 15 minutes to go, and looked like to be in the ascendancy. But Kilkenny just stepped up on them, really pressured them, started to turn them over, and then get scores again. So I suppose that's what we expect from Kilkenny, is to be put under that massive pressure and be able to come out of it.
Do you think this sort of ascendancy for Kilkenny is something that they're going to continue over the rest of the league and into the championship? Is that the direction they're heading, or are they still settling as a squad?
Well, look, you look at the players that have still to come back in. Adrian Mullen still has to come back in. TJ Reid still has to come back in. They have a nice run in now, in that they can go at this Cork team next week, conceivably win that game, get into a league final, go hammer and tongs at that. the Leinster Championship for them, I don't see as a pressure cooker the way the Munster Championship is. So they should target this league to go out and win it, and then look at the Leinster Championship and start picking off teams in that. They don't really feel the pressure until June. You know, you're looking at what's the 20th, 21st of March. June is when Kilkenny will really start to feel that pressure that the teams in Munster will start feeling on the 30th of April.
Does that kind of go back then to like the point Ger was making earlier about the league and what it actually matters to these teams?
I think the season has been flipped so significantly that players and fans are adjusting to the season, and the league does have its merit, and we just have to get used to the fact that teams use it as a kind of a stepping stone for the championship, but ultimately not everyone can win the championship. There's 2 cups to be won, so why not put your stamp on the league?
I guess that's the point, isn't it? That if you are Kilkenny at the end of this and you have a trophy and there's a night of celebration before the Leinster Championship starts, then Derek Ling and his selectors are going to feel pretty good about life. Whereas for other teams, some teams will absolutely celebrate it. But if Limerick win the league, they'll be like, okay, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty tepid from the point of view of Limerick, you know, with the heights that they've gotten to over the last number of years.
I'm sure they'd celebrate the night, you know, and I'm sure they would, and they would take it as an opportunity to do that, but obviously they've much bigger fish to fry really quickly afterwards. But I buy the argument that for Kilkenny, something like this would actually be a useful endorsement of, no, we're going the right direction here, don't be worrying, we've all got this.
Yeah, and they're embracing a new style, you know, and there's players on that Kilkenny team who don't have National League medals, you know, so every player, Dan Morrissey was speaking about it a couple of weeks ago, I think he has 2, they matter, they're in your pocket after you retire, so why not go after it in season?
Okay, what about Waterford then? You said they were very depleted, and so that's fair enough, but we're still awaiting the evidence of the first round of the Munster Championship to see how many of those players who were injured would actually make it back in time for that. So hard to know exactly what to expect. Are you seeing anything specific that you can say, okay, that's the work of Davy and his coaches?
Right. Well, look, I suppose a big talking point on Sunday was the formation for their puckouts. So Jack Fagan ended up next to well, he was practically in the square, in the Kilkenny square. 13 players inside the Kilkenny half on a puckout, only 2 Waterford players inside the 45. Really, I suppose, unusual setup.
So sorry, this is defensively when Waterford are pucking out.
Yeah, when Waterford are pucking
out the ball.
When
Kilkenny are pucking out.
No, when Waterford are pucking out the ball.
All right.
When Waterford are pucking out the ball, 2 Waterford players inside the 45, and every other Waterford player is as far up the field as they can go.
Okay, that's very aggressive.
That is very aggressive, and the suggestion was that this is a look towards Limerick, that if those wing backs are moving towards the opposition goal, then that automatically means that the likes of Garrett Hagerty, Tom Morrissey have to follow them, have to track them back the field, and it takes the pressure off of the Waterford defence.
It's a high wire act because if there's 2 Waterford defenders in their own half, there will be 2 Limerick attackers, and they could be 2 of the greatest attackers in the history of the game, you know? So
the turnovers that could ensue from this are mind-boggling, and I'm a little terrified.
But I'm dying to see
by
it.
this setup.
Like, wouldn't it be amazing to watch?
Oh God, Ger, I don't think hurling needs that radical.
Oh,
change.
come on.
I don't genuinely. There's a reason why wing backs play wing back. You know, there is not a necessity for a wing back to end up corner forward on their own puck out. I'm against Davy on this one. And after the match, Davy spoke about the low ebb that Waterford were in after losing to Clare last year and the horror that was the championship. And interestingly, Liam Cahill, who was obviously in that Waterford dressing room, now has Tip, who had as equally a tough year last year and has not kind of driven the same narrative coming out of his dressing room with Tip this year. So I think Davy could lay off on the Waterford being desperate last year narrative and focus on the positives. You know, I think some PR would be helpful there.
As in, you think it's wrong to talk about somebody else's team, and because it is a different team. Like that was the 2022 team. This is the 2023 team.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think that, I suppose, in direct contrast, Liam Cahill went into Tip, who didn't have a good year last year. And all of his post-match interviews have been incredibly positive. Now, helped by the fact that they're on a 5-match unbeaten run. But my thinking here is you don't necessarily need to labour the point that a team had a difficult year last year when you're talking about, the new season. So I think Waterford needs that break in Portugal this week, and hopefully they'll decide to scrap that mad puck-out strategy that they showed against Kilkenny last week.
No, I'm dying to see it. Come on, that could be it'll be an all-time great. It's like Lara chasing Tommy around Croke Park, right?
It's horrendous, and we'll never forget it. Honestly, we'll never forget it. It's I can't. Hurling has a structure, and it is beautiful.
But if Waterford go out against Limerick and it actually is successful for them, can you see that being like the sort of radical change that other teams are like, okay, well, this is what we need to do? Because Limerick are one of the great teams we've seen in hurling over the last couple of years. So if it works,
what if it works?
Other teams are going to be like, yeah, we're going to try this. We need to do something radical to actually get anywhere near the All Ireland.
Guys, I'm not on board with this. I'm not on the bus. That's it. No.
You're slashing the tyres of the bus and burning it and breaking the windows. Okay, fair enough. What about Cork? The Cork-Clare game. I think both these teams are relatively happy with where they are at the moment, are they?
Yeah, look, I 2-18 apiece on Sunday. Clare needed Wexford to beat Limerick to qualify for the semi-final. So realistically, that was never going to happen. Aidan McCarthy scored 111. Dave Reedy got a goal. They had a spread of scorers after that. Probably disappointed that they didn't get the win over Cork, just to kind of keep that momentum. Obviously, you remember Clare decimated Cork last year in the championship. So if they had beaten them again, there might have been that little bit of a hangover coming into the championship, that bit of nervousness. But now, obviously, Cork, 2 late points. Conor Cahalane got a screamer from out on the right-hand side, and Conor Lehan got a great point to get the draw, to keep Cork unbeaten as well as Tip. So I suppose the game had merit in that Padraig Power, the Cork full forward, got another great goal after 8 minutes. We saw more players. By the end of the season, I don't know if I'll remember all of the players' names, but right now it looks very impressive.
So we obviously have semi-finals and a final to go, and I guess the semi-finals is like another opportunity for the management team to get players out and play a high intensity game. So I suspect, because initially when I was thinking about this, do they actually want semi-finals? Is this a little bit like if Mayo and Roscommon had to play each other in a league final, as there was potential 3 or 4 weeks ago before Roscommon started to lose some games? They wouldn't really want to face each other 2 weeks in a row. But I do wonder if maybe actually these games are quite useful to get players as close as you can to championship pitch without having them tip over.
Yeah, I think we're learning a lot from the rugby, actually, which is shocking to say. But if you look at the way the Irish team went after the Grand Slam and targeted every team and weren't afraid of showing their hand, and tried to get to the pitch of it as best they could over the course of 8 weeks, and successfully did that, and the confidence that's instilled in that Irish team. I think GA teams could take a lot from that, and especially the 4 teams in the semi-finals this weekend. Go after it, show your hand. Maybe your hand will be too good for other teams in the long run. Don't be, I suppose, scared of giving away too much. Build the confidence in the players to know that they can do it. So for me, I think Tip and Limerick Saturday night, they're going to go at it. And I don't see why they shouldn't. And the same with Cork and Kilkenny on Sunday. Go at it if they have the players. I know Adrian Mullen won't be in the setup for Kilkenny on Sunday. I know that TJ Reid is unlikely to be in the setup. So it won't be full, championship teams, but certainly get as close to your championship team as you can and go at it.
Because it's 4 weeks. It's not very long, but it's also an age in many respects in terms of team preparation for the start of the round robin.
Yeah, and I think that the players themselves need to know that they can do it. It's not a case of, holding the handbrake until, the week before championship and then saying, right, lads, show me your absolute limit. I think players have to know that they can do it. There was a late chance for Waterford. I can't remember the player who struck the ball, but he was in a high pressure situation and it's inches wide. In championship, you'd be hoping that would go over. that's what the league is important for, because you show these players in these positions and whether they can handle it.
Yeah, okay. We should talk about Kildare. The late draw that they got against Offaly puts them through to the league final, and they'll play either Offaly or Kerry in that league final. They'll obviously have a week off, and hope that Offaly versus Kerry is one of those games with 7 red cards for both teams, and they come in depleted to the final. But it's like a seismic moment in Kildare hurling that they're on the verge of playing Division 1 hurling.
I saw a tweet actually on Sunday. I think it was Kildare is hurling only. So I had a little chuckle at that. Kildare hurling, I suppose, has been the bridesmaid to Kildare football for so many years, and they didn't have the same funding involved, but massive efforts in the last number of years to get involved in Kilkenny leagues, to get involved in Dublin leagues, to bring up the standard of Kildare hurling. And I was in Croke Park last May and saw them in Croke Park, and was really impressed with their physical conditioning and their striking. They were very clean hurlers, and my worry is that to go up to Division 1 now might do them a disservice. They need kind of all of the players to build together. You'll see from the likes of Laois, Westmeath, Antrim, it's been a struggle. And, Antrim were 7 points poor against Kilkenny, lost by 18 points to Tip by the end of the league. Kildare, while having this seismic moment and getting up to Division 1, it might be a year too soon. So you shouldn't always wish for things that you're not ready for.
Yeah, look, I understand that if they go up, the likelihood is that they'll come straight back down. But to be one of those teams who is at least in that group, in that tier, would be a leap forward from a bit where, as you said, they were in the third tier a couple of years ago. So, the job that Herity has done is massively progressive. And I also think that there's a population centre in Kildare where there is an opportunity for them to grow the game and actually become a proper dual county. But it's going to take a massive leap of imagination from the GAA at central level to fund them and to fund Westmeath and to fund Antrim, because there's a lot of lip service paid to the notion that hurling is our national sport, when actually it's a sport played in 10 counties properly, and it's so hard to break into those top 10 that ultimately, unless a massive amount of funding is given over, we're going to be stuck with that.
I've seen more promotion of hurling in Uganda in the last 3 months than I have in places like Westmeath, Laois and Antrim. I genuinely agree with you. There needs a massive change in the mindset in terms of how they promote the game and the funding for the game. I think Kildare, if they were to go up to Division 1, would require the fans in and the people in the GAA in Kildare to be incredibly supportive, because if those losses were to occur the way they've happened for the likes of Antrim, Westmeath and Laois, it takes confidence out of teams, and the GAA would really need to support them if they were to go up to Division 1. And I don't know, Ger, if you saw Kildare getting hockeying 3 weeks in a row, is that something that you're going to be encouraged by, or are you going to look to hide from it if you were a Kildare supporter?
You'd hope that the stuff that's coming along underneath is giving you some comfort that they're going to be able to improve. I guess Naas ended up losing in the end to Ballyhale in the senior All-Ireland Club Championship, Leinster Club Championship this year, whereas they'd been playing intermediate in previous years. So you can begin to hang your hat on some signs of progress. Did Laois draw? Westmeath drew at Wexford, didn't they, last year? 2 years ago?
Yes. Yeah.
So I accept the point. If it was 7-24 to 3 points or 4 points or 5 points in all of the games, you're like, oh, this is a disaster. But with funding, with help, maybe that's not going to be the case. I guess. Look, I've got to be an optimist here.
Yes, I know, because where would we go otherwise? I know, but I just feel
your brutalist Cork realism here is crushing me, Sarah. That's I understand. You're the big dog, and you've always been the big dog, and you understand. You don't understand what it's like for us.
I actually played camogie for Dublin for 3 years. I absolutely understand what it's like to take a beating. So, everyone always asks, how can improvements be made? But it is genuinely little building blocks, and I have to admire David Herity for going in to that Kildare group and sticking with them for the last, I think this is his third year with them, and I really enjoyed watching. It's year 5?
I think so, yeah.
Jesus.
Well, I heard him say that recently, but maybe I need to just. I think he's brilliant. Like, I actually, again, you never come away from a conversation with Herity without going, Jesus, that guy. I would follow him anywhere, you know.
Well, I played for him for a year, and we had right battles, the two of us. But I genuinely admire what he does with teams. He's so disciplined and so dogged, and he gets results. So I have to admire him, and I really enjoyed watching them in Croke Park this year. So, you know, that's a bonus. Yeah. But would I pay €18 next February to see them play Kilkenny? Probably not, because €18 is a lot of money to be watching something that could go horribly wrong.
All right, on that cheery note, Sarah, thanks a million.
Bye.
Sarah Donovan, give us thoughts on the hurling situation there. Up Kildare is all I say. Kathleen, I mentioned briefly to Arseblog a little bit earlier on about the game between Arsenal and Bayern. What's the Katie McCabe scenario at the moment?
She's back in the team pretty much. I think Arsenal have had a bit of resurgence since they won the League Cup. You know, it gave them, I suppose they played with the bit of grit that they have been missing for the last while. Tonight's going to be really difficult for them. Like, Bayern are really on a good run at the moment. They're 11 games unbeaten, and they've won their last 13 games at home, I think. And Arsenal are away to them as well. So it'll be interesting to see. They are missing players like Linda Dahlman and Gwyn as well, who are some of their top players. They both play with the Germany national team. Emma Byrne on Koigig has said a couple of times that she thinks Arsenal can win the Champions League, which I think is optimistic at this stage. But also with the way they're going in the league, it's looking like they might not make the top 3 places. And if that happens,
so they need to win, right?
Yeah, so winning would be kind of important for them. And it's also the 10-year anniversary of the last time they won it, so it would be a nice full circle moment for the team if they did manage it. But I think with missing the likes of Mead and Miedema, it's going to be too difficult for them this season.
So on balance, this is tricky, but winnable over the 2 legs?
Yeah, I think they definitely have the squad there to win it. Bayern play a very physical, attacking style of football, and I think that Arsenal's defence is probably the area that they're going to struggle in. But if they can get that midfield to click, if they can get, Kim Lill, Leah Williamson played in midfield the last time they played, and she was sensational, and that's not her normal position. So if they can get that midfield to click, I think that's going to be essential to them doing well over the 2 legs. Tonight might be a bit of a push, but I say if they get a draw tonight and then a win at home in London, they'll be happy out.
Am I right saying it's a 5:30 kickoff? Or it's early?
5:45, I think.
5:45, yeah. Okay.
So you get it on Dazen.
So Katie McCabe in quarter-final action in the Champions League tonight at 5:45. Okay, on tomorrow's show, Tommy Rooney and the Power Rankings return. Cian Tracy's Six Nations team of the tournament, Enda McNulty about his new book, and also obviously his relationship with Leinster and Ireland. And Nathan previews the Latvia game, which of course takes place tomorrow evening. It's our first opportunity, hopefully, to see Evan Ferguson start a game. Maybe you keep him in reserve, maybe you don't unfurl him fully for the show tomorrow and you wait for the France game, but we'll see. Plus plenty more. Right now, Kenny Cunningham on last night's show. Have a terrific day.
Now your Welcome Along football show. Kenny Cunningham is in the house. Kenny, let's talk some football.
Let's park it now.
You've talked enough.
Let's park it. I'm just happy to your glow, Joe. Your glow.
Yeah.
Just wanted to come in this evening and experience it.
Well, it's a great time.
Feed off it.
I tell you what, this time next week, we'll be getting ready for kickoff against France. Aviva Stadium will be hopping.
Oh, amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Coincidentally, yeah. What a double that'd be.
What a double that would be. Are you doing...
I'm hopeful.
RTE commentary?
No.
No?
No. No.
I often see you there.
See me where? At the...
Aviva?
No, if you... Keep me head down, and...
You don't even say hi to us.
I was going to say jump over the turnstiles there.
That's the worst part when you do commentary for that other crowd, is that we're in the row right behind you. And at some stage you'll turn around and go, oh, all right. And that will be the end of the conversation. Nothing. It's like you don't know us.
It's like the enemy, isn't it? It's like the enemy. Just for one night only. One night only.
It's unbelievable.
Usually a bit of radio do down there.
That's what I'm talking about.
The night of the games.
Yeah. Are you not doing radio?
I haven't even looked that far ahead. I'm not.
Oh, that means
Wouldn't be that organised, Joe.
That means you are.
Wouldn't be that organised. From there, I'm there. You'll see the back of my head. You look down, you'll see the back of my head.
Well, we always say we're better off without you on those nights.
Don't be trying to nick any of me. We get a little food hamper there, don't we, down the front? You don't, do you lot?
I get the dinner downstairs.
You and Stewie Bourne.
So, let's talk Premier League weekend that was, an FA Cup weekend indeed, and then we'll talk next week.
It's all confusing that. I'm not a fan of it at all. The FA Cup / Premier League weekend. Not for me. Doesn't work.
Well, you'll have to cope. Antonio Conte, he's grabbed the headlines. So Southampton 3, Spurs 3, from 3-1 up.
Oh my God, that
to
game.
3-3. So, and we'll hear from him in a few moments' time. But he's using words like selfish and excuses. From what you saw, what is it about his players that you think is irritating him so much?
Well, you can't just look at it off the back of the performance at the weekend. This has been a reoccurring theme for Tottenham all season. This type of performance, Joe, from Tottenham. And I've spoken to a couple of Tottenham supporters about it. I mean, they're literally being tortured, Tottenham supporters, this season. It's literally mental cruelty in terms of what they're having to see. And I'm not sure if we spoke about it before. I have spoken to somebody about it, and I've never seen it, to be honest with you. I'm talking any team. I wouldn't even say like an elite team competing at the top end of the Premiership. Even the teams at the bottom this season, teams in the bottom 4 or 5, teams are really struggling, Joe, and have done for the majority of the season. We know who they are. I can't say I've looked at kind of Bournemouth this season, even kind of Southampton, West Ham, Everton, those type of teams, and regularly looked at them and thought, they're not trying. You know, there's a real lack of application amongst even the teams down there who are really struggling for most of the season. Lack of quality from them, lack of confidence to a certain extent, but in terms of application and kind of attitude, generally speaking, it's there. You can argue now they're not good enough, they'll go down because of it, fair enough. But I don't see that real kind of lack of like mental resolve, application, determination, going out and doing the fundamentals, going out running, tackling, tracking back, running ahead of the ball, being vocal, encouraging people. All the kind of bases are given that you take with any professional player or group of players. And Tottenham's the only example, I just don't see it. The only team that kind of stands alone. I've looked at them so much this season, and I'm thinking, what's going on? What's going on with this lot? They're just like going through the motions. Haven't got out second gear. It looks like a funny old group to me, the dressing room, and it shouldn't be that because they tick a lot of boxes in terms of like senior players in there. You'd look at them from the outside and you think, well, they're spoiling the team strong. Kane, Son, experienced players, good age. Højbjerg to an extent, Dyer, Lloris, Ben Davis, these type of players, solid backbone to the team, experienced players who you could trust and would drive that dressing room, wouldn't allow standards to drop, would be kind of quite demanding and vocal, and younger players would take their lead from that, that type of thing, which is kind of rolled out, you see in different dress. We've all experienced it. I'm not too sure it's in that Spurs dress. I look at players being interviewed, Kane being interviewed, Dyer being interviewed. Quite sullen characters.
Do you think Kane's trying?
No, I'm not sure it's as simplistic as that. He's trying, he isn't trying. But certainly in terms of like just mentally, that kind of real kind of focus when you go on the pitch. When you leave the dressing room most weeks, everybody's saying the same things, every dressing room up and down the country. Yeah. Right, let's start well. High intensity, win your first tackle. That's... let's start well. Let's put them on the back foot. And again, like I said, all the basic, all the kind of fundamentals, but it's just not there. The amount of time Spurs have started slowly, first half, just can't get going. Suddenly it needs a trigger second half for them to find something, and then they come on strong, and then you think, well, now they look a good side, but it doesn't happen often enough. So for me, it's like, ultimately the manager's going to he's going to pay the ultimate price, isn't he? The manager's responsibility ultimately, and he's going to go. We understand that. You can argue about he's calling out Levy and he wants to go. I understand that there's an extent, there might be some truth in that. But fundamentally, what he's saying, what he had to say in that interview, I know a little bit's lost in translation, but I'm all over that. Because I've been saying that all season with this Spurs team. I really have, Joe.
But what's the explanation?
I don't know, because
when a team regularly goes on the pitch.
It's interesting when you talk about a culture in a dressing room. The reason I ask about Kane is he strikes me as ultimate diligent professional. And you would look at a dressing room and you would say, well, if the senior pros are a good batch, that will filter down. Kane looks like a decent leader.
Yeah, but it depends what you mean by good pros. For me, aren't just worried about themselves. Now, good pros like being prepared well and all that type of thing. Make sure your game to an extent stems up to a certain level. It's a bit of a selfish thing. We all have that a little bit. But a good pro for me, it's bigger than that, isn't it? It's about the team, the collective, the dressing room. It's about dragging more out of other people around. It's a team game there. So that's
on that point, I'm not so sure Kane is that personality.
I'm not sure they have too many of them. I look at Dyer. Looks a very quiet, introspective type of fella. Is he the one in the kind of dressing room the younger players look at and really gravitate to, even in terms of personality?
Lloris doesn't strike me as inspirational, no nonsense captain. Son looks self-contained as well.
Yes, so this is what I'm talking about. I think that dressing room is pretty unique. So the normal rules don't apply with those senior, but that's what I'm saying. It looks like a sullen. A little bit of a. No, I don't think it's because I'm not interested in anything. We know Kane is driven by those individual accolades, Spurs top scorer, chasing Shearer's Premiership record, England, the whole shebang, and that's all well and good to a point. But it can't be at the expense of the group. And whether he's looking a little bit down the line in terms of the summer and the next move, you're going to talk about Kane in particular. I don't think it's all about Harry Kane. Don't get me wrong, but he is a factor in it. So that's what I'm scratching my head. It's hard to put your finger on it, Joe, but their performances this season has been a consistent theme all season, and I haven't seen it in any other team.
Wow.
Where they almost literally, it's through the motion, kind of down tools, lethargy, can't be bothered, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like Frankenstein, they've only like a Frankenstein team, just stumbling, too often.
And for you, that explains why so many bad first halves and then a degree of, we better come back here, the trigger that suggests a team that aren't in the right mindset.
I think so. Yeah, it's a mental collective in there.
Because Kane scored 25 goals. Like, he's taking care of his own business. We're talking about the culture of the whole dressing room.
That's another argument in terms of whether he is I think the goals thing's an interesting one with Kane. I think it's too easy now to look at Kane 2025. He's doing his stuff. Well, he's doing his stuff when he gets in positions in around the penalty box and he's in a position to score. We know how good he is. But as he's doing his stuff out of possession when Spurs haven't got the ball, I'd argue he's not, and it hasn't been for quite some time.
In terms of closing down and work rate.
And I'm not sure physically he can do it. So this for me lends itself into the really interesting argument about Kane in the summer. For me, there's only one club he can go to, and that's Manchester United, because he's going to stay in the Premiership for the reasons that we said.
Yeah.
Individual accolades, chasing those records. So he's going to stay. So the only club he's got for me is Manchester United, and it seems to be a given. Manchester United desperate to get him up there because they need goals, as if that's it. So for me, I think Ten Hag's looking at this a little bit different. I think he's looking at Kane thinking, absolutely, I want those goals, but the drop off. I've just got a number 9 out of the football club.
You're this is Ronaldo part 2.
Yeah, I've just got a number 9 out of the football club who's exactly that. We've got to carry our possession of the football in terms of the press, etc., etc. And now I'm going to go and get another one. In a similar vein.
So with Ronaldo, he didn't have the legs to press. Do you think Kane, the issue was legs or application?
I think it's both. I don't think from as an athletic point of view he can do it. You look at Weghorst at the moment. People say, "Well, he's starting the game." Now Weghorst isn't starting the game because his individual quality, how good he is when United are in possession. You know what I mean? He's a clinical goal scorer. For me, he almost plays because how good he is out of possession.
Did you see more from Kane off the ball in recent years?
No, I'd say maybe 5 years when Pochettino was there, 4-3-3, and he had that little, played with more intensity, kind of pressing. Yeah, there was more there. But I think he's different. Was he 30-31? So I see a drop off now, just in terms of how physically he can get it. It comes to us all. It comes to us all at different points. But I look at him Saturday. Oh, Joe, he's literally walking. And do you know someone trying to kid you on, trying to close down the centre half, but he's not. He's not closing. He's getting to 10 yards of him, centre half steps forward. He walks into another. He walks into traffic. He walks into people to get away from. You can see it. I'm seeing it there in front. It wasn't just Saturday. Seen it all season, probably last year as well. So that's going to be an issue for me. I'll be absolutely fascinated Because, like I said, people think it's a given. Kind of 1 year to go, 60 million, job done, easy decision, got to get him up there. Goals. I understand the goals, but it's the flip side as well. In the modern game now, Joe, that argument like 15 years ago or whatever, when I played, yeah, we'll carry him. He's that good, and we'll carry him, no problem. I don't think there's too many managers now that'll suck that up. So I'm fascinated to see what will happen with him. But I have a lot of sympathy for Conte in terms of what he had to say. And I think it's just people will say, you're digging out the players. And I'd be the same. It's a last resort. You go public and dig out your play. It's literally, you're throwing a grenade in there. But he's obviously, he's tried to protect them. He's tried to circumnavigate it. But obviously he's at the point now where that's it. There's nothing else. This is it. I've got to throw a grenade into the dressing room because there's nothing else left.
I'm conscious people maybe have better things to do with their weekend than watch Antonio Conte's press conference. So to give you a sense of what he was talking about, Arthur, do we have the audio? So we'll play the audio and I'll read out some choice quotes in a moment. But the audio gives a real sense of his emotion and his sense of irritation, to be frank. So here's a little taster of Conte post-match after 3-1 down to 3-3 against Southampton.
You are finding an alibi, another alibi. You try to find alibi, an excuse for the players. Okay, continue to do this, to find excuse for the players. You do only this. Excuse for the players. Yeah, but the players maybe my future, and then okay, they lost confidence, they lost spirit, they lost to be a team. Excuse. Try to protect every time, and this situation. Come on. We are professional. We paid. The club paid us a lot of money. The players receive money. Me receive money. You understand? Not to find excuse and don't have spirit or don't show the sense of belongings or don't show sense of responsibility, because we are showing this, and for me this is unacceptable for me, because this is the first time in my career to see a situation like this, and until now I wasn't able to change, but compare last season, the situation went to become worse.
Why, Antonio? Why do you think it is like this?
Why? I don't know, because they are used here. They're used here. Don't play for something important. Yeah. And they don't play. They don't want to play under pressure. They don't want to play under stress. Yeah, it's easy in this way. And Tottenham story is this. 20 years that there is the owner and never won something. But why?
Yeah. Like, it's a devastating diagnosis.
Yeah.
And it's from the manager. And people have said, well, is this self-serving, go public? Maybe there's a bit of that. But I think I would tend to agree with you. He sounds like a man there who's gone nuclear, because last season I seemed to get through to them. It's worse this season. And he said later on in the press conference, until now I tried to hide the situation, but there are 10 games to go and some people think we can fight. Fight for what? With this spirit, this attitude, this commitment, what? 7th, 8th, 10th? And as he mentioned in the clip we played, he later said, I'm not used to being in this position. I'm really upset. Everyone has to take their responsibility. I want to see fire. I haven't seen it. I said I want to see fire in their eyes and their hearts. I want to see the right spirit. Training sessions, on the pitch. I mean, it's funny. There have been times over the last couple of years when Roy Keane might be in punditry and they'll come to him and ask him about Spurs, and he'll sort of say, it's Spurs, isn't it? Like, it's Spurs. And I would think, well, come on, it's a bit simplistic, or that, different teams to the one you played against, different culture. But even Conte is saying there, same owner, not used to doing it the right way. Meh.
No, no, I think that's fair. It's there, that kind of soft underbelly. It's there. We've seen it all season.
What about the self-serving argument?
No, the alter argument would be maybe the Spurs players mentally are in a bad place because of the dynamic between them and the manager over a period of time since he's been there. how he interacts with the players in terms of what he demands of the players, maybe on the training pitch, maybe over a period of time, that maybe the players are maybe stop listening, maybe because of him, his kind of personality, his man management style, which I think that might be the opposite argument. So I take that maybe to a point, but even as I'm saying that, I'm cringing a little bit. It's weak. It feels a bit weak even to make. That doesn't help. Don't get me wrong. You know, we've all had managers, not a massive fan of him, I'm not sure, but ultimately you're right, it's your responsibility. You come together in the dressing room when you're walking onto the pitch, right lads, about us now. You know, forget about what the managers had to say, or you're not happy with this, that, the other. Let's get on the pitch and let's just do the fundamentals, get out there and do the fundamentals. He's talking about kind of spirit forward in their eyes, so that's what I'm talking about, that's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? That real kind of intensity to go out and to impose yourself, to dominate your man, to demand of others around you, you know, that type of thing. I think he's right. Now you could argue, is he culpable in that? Yeah, possibly so. I mean, I'm a big fan of Conte personally, always have been, but I imagine he can be difficult at times, you know what I mean? And maybe to deal with on a one-to-one, maybe a little bit cold, distant. You know, he's got that Italian mentality, speaks about Italian football, professional. You know, you're getting paid, you got to turn up and, you know, put a performance in. You know, you're getting paid, this is it. We're professionals. You know, that type of real Italian kind of mindset. Maybe he's got a, you could argue, maybe slightly different approach with a different type of dressing room. You've got to be more of a little chameleon as a manager. Oh, this is a funny old dressing room. This few strange personalities, and you've got to be careful how you speak to them. So he's got to tiptoe his way around that a little bit if you wanted to flip it the opposite way. But we are where we are with Spurs. But he's right. Spurs are sitting fourth place, or fifth, is it now?
Fourth, but games
just
in hand.
Just 4 games in hand. Exactly. And people would say, wow, the great position Spurs they can still go. But he's looking at thinking, no, we've no chance. Well, from what I've seen all season, how are things going to change between now and the end of the season?
Well, that's the next question. His contract's up at the end of the season anyway. The report in a piece I read in the Daily Mail is Daniel Levy is considering options, and he has spoken to Conte, because, you know, Conte did reference same owner and same old situation. So I think he's given assurances. I wasn't talking about you. I wasn't saying, oh, you're the problem, you're the same owner.
Yeah, I didn't take
same
that,
result. It's very much about the players, and Levy has taken advice. Whether he reaches out to senior players and inquires as to whether this is repairable or where they are, I don't know. Is that manager-player relationship now completely severed, in your opinion, based on Conte going public? I suspect he said a lot of this to the players already privately, but the going public, is that like...
generally speaking, yeah, the players, I think, would wash their hands of you in those situations. So that's tough. It's going to be really... You'd like to think the players can rise above that and put the team, the club, kind of force, because what's at stake, still a huge amount to kind of play for. But generally speaking, their perception of the manager and what he's done, the perception will be he's trying to shove us under a bus here, he's trying to protect himself. No, I don't think it's as simple as that. You know, I think he speaks from the heart there, Conte. He's at his wit's end almost with the players, but I think the players' perception will be a little bit different. It'll be a case of he's looking after himself, he wants to get sacked, it's all about him.
And I think people will say you're being a touch naive, that of course this is self-serving on Conte's part. He's no fool. He knows what he's done here. He's taken advantage of the Spurs' reputation and saving himself, because he knows it's not going to happen.
Yeah, but it's only like a couple of... He's out of contract in the end of the...
Yeah, but he's saving himself.
End of the season.
He's blowing the whole thing up. He's like, this is how terrible they are.
Yeah,
and Kenny Cunningham swallowed it.
Yeah, you know, I understand. But I think he's right at the end of the day. I think he's telling hard truths.
That's the redeeming point.
And I think you might say he's finished there. I think with this group of players, he's kind of finished. But the argument is, do you build a team around that spine of players that we're talking about going forward, even a new manager coming in? Or does Levy look at Conte and say, I'm still having this fella, so I've got to back him? And in the summer, not only has Kane got to go, that core group of senior players that I'm talking about, who aren't providing that kind of leadership in there, they've got to go as well. Dora's got to go. Loris has got to go.
Daniel Levy is not a let's have a big summer of spending kind of a chairman.
Well, no, that's fair enough. Then Conte's got to go. That rub is always going to be there. So that's the likelihood.
His contract is up. Well, I think he's done. It's just a case of whether it's now or summer.
But my argument would be if for some time now Levy's been thinking, right, he's off. Yeah. He's off. It's done. Has come out public and said it, which he wouldn't do because he's still in a decent position. Doesn't want to rock the boat. And if he's making a couple of phone calls in the background, or intermediaries have been talking to, let's say it's Pochettino, saying, look, this job's here in the summer. Do you want it? Yeah, I'll have it. right, let's put it on the back burner of the summer. So if that's a given, this is a big jump from my point of view. Pochettino's told them, assured them that he will take the job in the summer. For me now, off the back of what we saw at the weekend, you get him in now.
Okay.
I think that of everything that we've said, that makes the most sense now, because that change room isn't going to change between now and the end of the season. That dynamic isn't going to change between the players and the manager. So what can you do? Can't change the players. Get the manager out. Pochettino's got a good relationship with the senior players in that dressing room. See, can he spark something?
Yeah.
Can he get a reaction? Get those players on side
Scramble
and get a bit of
Champions
forward momentum? Yeah, between now and the end of the season.
Oof, very interesting. And even the timing, international break. You know. This wasn't like a let's repair this the next morning. Everyone, look, I got a bit carried away. Let's all be friends. This is like 10 days of stewing on this thing. Imagine the players. Oh my goodness. We've got to take a short break. Our football show coverage brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
The Heineken.